Westchester. Xavier's Academy for Gifted Youngsters. In the classroom, Dean Charles Xavier sat in his wheelchair. He lifted a hand toward the group of half-grown kids and smiled. All right, that's enough for today. Class dismissed. Chairs scraped back. The students filed out, laughing and talking as they went. Then Charles added calmly, "Qin, stay behind a moment." A boy around 17 or 18 paused. Black eyes, yellow skin, unmistakably Asian features. He turned back. "Professor, you wanted to see me?" Charles nodded, warmth in his expression. "Are you settling in? Living at the school, I mean." Qin gave a small nod. "It's fine. At least I don't have to worry about food anymore." "That's good." Charles studied him for a beat, then asked in a gentle tone, "I've heard you often go to the training ground with the others, to watch. Or join in." Qin didn't deny it. Charles sighed lightly, choosing his words. "I understand why. But you don't carry the X gene. The chances of you ever awakening an ability are extremely low. So I'm asking you, as someone who cares about you, don't cling too hard to hope." He paused, then added softly, "This world isn't kind to mutants. Being ordinary can be a blessing. Don't you think?" Qin's face stayed calm. "It's fine," he said. "I just like watching them train. Even if I never awaken, it doesn't matter." Charles looked at him for a moment longer. He could tell Qin wasn't going to be persuaded. In the end, he exchanged a few casual words and let him go. As the boy's back disappeared through the doorway, Charles's smile faded into a quiet worry. He won't give up. And if reality keeps denying him, that stubbornness could twist into something ugly over time. For the first time, Charles regretted his own experiment. He'd once considered recruiting a few ordinary kids, hoping it would help mutants and humans understand each other better. But now, maybe it was a mistake. The moment Qin Haisheng left the classroom, he broke into a quick jog toward the backyard training ground. Professor Charles really had to pick that moment to talk? It was training time. And training time meant attribute bubbles. When Qin reached the field, his eyes instantly locked onto the air above the ground. There they were. Floating orbs, drifting like soap bubbles in sunlight. 2 of them were colored. Qin's breathing quickened. He'd been doing this long enough to know the rules. Colorless bubbles were basic stats. Strength, speed, endurance, mental force, defense, recovery. But colored bubbles? Those were rare. Those were the real prize. They were the cores of superpowers. Most ability cores only needed 100 points to activate. 100 points and Qin Haisheng would finally become a mutant. Ordinary mutants had one power. Qin had a path to countless powers. As long as he kept collecting. He rushed into the training ground, eyes shining, weaving through the space and tapping the bubbles with his body. Each touch triggered a crisp system prompt in his ear. Picked up +2 Constitution. From Phantom Cat. Picked up +2 Strength. From Colossus. Picked up +1 Defense. From Iceman. But as the numbers popped up, Qin's mood soured. 1 point. 2 points. Too low. He clenched his jaw and cursed inwardly. When mutants first released their powers, the bubbles that dropped were usually worth 3 to 10 points. But the longer a bubble floated, the more it decayed. Once it hit 0, it vanished completely. Which meant the bubbles he was collecting now were leftovers. Scraps. And that was exactly why Charles delaying him annoyed him so much. A few minutes late, and the best drops were gone. "Yo, you again." A shove hit Qin's shoulder. John Allardyce, the fire user, stood nearby with a smug look. He pushed Qin again, like he owned the ground. "Professor Charles already told you, didn't he? No X gene means you'll never be one of us. So stop dreaming." John's grin widened. "Get lost. Before you accidentally get hurt." Haha. He flicked open a lighter, snapped his palm forward. A red fire dragon burst into the air and slashed past Qin, scorching across the field. It crashed into an archery target on the far side of the artificial lake and turned it into ash. John watched Qin, waiting for the flinch. Waiting for fear. Because Qin Haisheng wasn't popular with most of the male students. The girls liked him. Too much. No surprise. Qin had a clean, sharp kind of looks that stood out here, different from the usual rugged Western style. And that made the guys even more hostile. Most of them didn't bother bullying an ordinary person, even if they didn't like him. But John? John never held back. He wanted Qin to panic. Maybe even embarrass himself. Except, Qin didn't step back. He wasn't scared. He looked excited. John's smile twitched. What the hell? I'm threatening you. Why do you look like you just got a gift? Then Qin did something even stranger. Ignoring the heat shimmering in the air, he stretched out his hand and chased the tail end of the fire dragon as it faded, as if he wanted to touch it. John stared. He knew his flames. They could spike past 2,000 degrees in an instant. Even after the fire passed, the remaining heat in the air should still be terrifying. Other people would have backed away. Even John himself wouldn't casually stand inside his own residual heat. So, what was wrong with this kid? How is he fine? Don't tell me this yellow-skinned guy is actually some kind of freak? John's thoughts were boiling when he noticed what Qin was really reaching for. A bubble had dropped. Not colorless. Not pale. A deep, blazing red that looked like it had fire trapped inside it. Qin's pupils sharpened. His heart slammed once hard. Fire element core bubble. Finally. He'd been at the academy for a month, collecting every day. He'd gathered plenty of basic stats, but superpower cores were luck-based. And the one he'd come closest to completing was fire. Because John trained almost daily. Bad temper, sure. But he worked hard. Qin had already collected 96 points of fire element core. 96. 4 points away from awakening his first power. So when the red bubble appeared in front of him, Qin didn't care about John's attitude. He didn't care about the heat. He didn't care about anything except one thing. This was the last step. He leaned forward, hand reaching out, eyes bright with hunger. Come on, he whispered. Flame ability. Open. Truthfully, Qin Haisheng never thought much of John's fire ability. Yeah, the guy could control flames, but he couldn't just create fire from nothing. He needed a flame source as a trigger. And worse, he wasn't truly fireproof either. If he lost control, he could burn himself just as easily. It was awkward. Hard to even describe. But Qin Haisheng had already decided something long ago. He was going to keep picking up attributes every day. Keep grinding. Keep collecting. Sooner or later, he'd gather every kind of superpower core there was. So, what did it matter which one came first? Only kids made choices. He wanted them all. That's why, even if fire wasn't his favorite, Qin Haisheng still felt a rush of excitement when the first real awakening finally came within reach. He stretched out his hand and touched the red bubble. A familiar prompt rang out in his mind. Picked up Fire Element Core +6. From Burning Man. Then another line followed immediately. Fire Element Core has exceeded 100 points. Fire Attribute Ability activating. In the next instant, Qin Haisheng felt the world tilt. Not physically. It was his perception. Everything in his vision suddenly seemed sharper, more layered. And in the air around him, countless tiny red specks appeared, floating like dust in sunlight. They weren't random. They felt close. Familiar. As if they were waiting for him. With just a thought, Qin sensed he could gather those red specks within a certain range and make them move as he wished. Fire elements. So that's what this was. Fire Attribute Ability successfully activated. First time awakening detected. Optimization chance granted. Optimization successful. Congratulations, 4th level Fire Attribute Ability acquired, Flame King. Qin Haisheng's mind went blank for a second. Then the system continued, cold and precise. Flame King possesses natural affinity with fire elements. No external fire source required. Flames can be generated from nothing. Can mobilize fire elements within a certain range. Maximum flame temperature, 3,600 degrees Celsius. Automatically gains A-class fire damage immunity. Immune to all burn damage below 3,600 degrees Celsius. Can briefly enter flame form, granting immunity to most physical attacks. Qin Haisheng's heart slammed. So First Awakenings could be optimized too? If he'd known for sure, he would have wanted his first power to start at level 4 and optimize upward into level 5. But he also knew that was fantasy right now. He was in the academy. The only confirmed level 4 mutant he could regularly see was Professor Charles. And Charles almost never used his power openly in front of students. Qin Haisheng had squatted here for a full month and only once managed to grab a psychic core bubble from Charles. 3 points. That was it. As for Magneto, he hadn't even seen the man. So yeah, a level 4 awakening felt miles away. Yet here he was. John's ability might have been mediocre, but it was still level 3. After optimization, it had jumped straight into level 4. Meaning, Qin Haisheng was now standing at the same tier as Professor X and Magneto. At least on paper. Hey, yellow boy. John's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. I told you to get out of the way. You deaf or something? John had barked twice already and got no response. In his eyes, Qin Haisheng was deliberately ignoring him. The irritation on his face turned into anger. And anger turned into stupidity. John didn't care about academy rules anymore. A fist-sized fireball formed in his palm and shot straight toward Qin Haisheng's head. He wasn't trying to kill him. He wanted to ruin the face. Burn his hair, scorch his skin, make sure the girls didn't look at him the same way again. Stop. John, are you crazy? Gasps erupted across the training ground. If John had aimed that at another mutant, it would have been a violation, but not a disaster. Mutants had better defense. Some regeneration. They could take it. But Qin Haisheng? In everyone's mind, he was just a normal kid. A fireball to the head meant death. Colossus moved to intervene, but it was too late. The fireball was already above Qin Haisheng. Then, it stopped, hovering in midair. People froze. Someone exhaled in relief. He held back. He's just trying to scare him. But they didn't notice John's face. John looked like he'd seen a ghost in broad daylight. Because he wasn't holding back. He wasn't controlling it. The fireball drifted down, slowly, obediently, as if being guided by an invisible hand. It landed in Qin Haisheng's palm. And, before anyone could even process that, the fireball snapped backward. Twice the speed it had come in. It slammed into John's chest and detonated. Boom. The impact sent John flying. His body lifted off the ground like a rag doll and crashed into the artificial lake several meters away with a huge splash. Silence swallowed the training ground. Everyone stared at Qin Haisheng like they were seeing him for the first time. The ordinary kid Professor X had declared would never awaken. Had just controlled fire like it belonged to him. A few seconds passed. Then Colossus's expression tightened. He gestured sharply at Qin. Kid, come with me. The professor wants to see you. Qin Haisheng finally snapped out of the haze of excitement and adrenaline. So Charles noticed. Of course he noticed. A psychic powerhouse like that, how could anything hide from him for long? Luckily, Charles wasn't the kind of man who rummaged through someone's memories without permission. Otherwise, Qin Haisheng's biggest secret, the fact he wasn't from this world at all, would have been exposed a long time ago.
Hey everyone, welcome to our channel, and thank you for your support. If there's a favorite novel on the channel and you want the next part, you're just one step away. Become a Patreon member and I can make it depending on your tier. Thank you for your attention.
Qin Haisheng was awakening his superpowers just now. There will definitely be noticeable energy fluctuations. However, there were too many mutants present at the time, and no one noticed that they interfered with each other. However, Professor X, who has the strongest psychic ability in the world, is not uncommon for him to be able to sense it at such a close distance, even if he is not at the scene. Although Qin Haisheng was a little drumming in his heart, he didn't know if Professor X would probe his memories out of curiosity. But at this time, as long as he still wants to stay in the Mutant Academy, he can't never see Professor X. So after quietly picking up the few remaining attribute bubbles on the training ground, he obediently followed behind Kuli and walked towards the Academy building. Oh, shit. Colossus walked far away before he suddenly remembered something. As soon as I looked back, seeing that everyone on the training ground was whispering, John, who had fallen into the artificial lake, had not yet surfaced. He couldn't help but knock on his metal skull hard, making a clang sound. Hell, Bobby, Carlos, get that guy out of John. It's not deep, but I guess that kid can't swim. When everyone heard this, they remembered. John fell into the lake and was non-moving. That guy is a fireman, and the thing he fears most is water, so how could he possibly swim? Of course, with that guy's mutant physique, he should not be able to die if he drowns for 10 or 8 minutes. But if it takes a little longer, it's hard to say. In the dean's office, Charles looked at Qin Haisheng in front of him with a shocked expression, and he was a little skeptical. A month ago, the kid in front of him found Xavier Genius Academy on his own and wanted to become a student of the academy. At that time, he had carefully probed the child's body and was sure that he could not sense the mistake. At that time, the child clearly did not have any X gene in his body. The reason why these mutants awaken a variety of different superpowers. It's because they all have the inherited X gene in their bodies. People with X genes may not always be able to awaken superpowers. But if you don't have the X gene, you won't be able to awaken your superpowers. This is almost universally accepted common sense. Of course, there are also some evil organizations that will use some cruel methods. For example, in the body of ordinary people, the serum drug purified from the mutant is injected, and then use extremely cruel methods to torture each other constantly, so there is also a certain probability that ordinary people can awaken superpowers. Deadpool's broken mouth was awakened in this way. But Qin Haisheng's situation is obviously different. In the past month, Qin Haisheng has been living in the academy and has never left. In the academy, although Qin Haisheng was not a mutant, he had been ostracized and had some small frictions. But absolutely no one has abused or tortured him. So how did he transform from an ordinary person to a mutant? Could it be that, often living with a large number of mutants, there is also a certain chance that you will awaken? Professor Charles felt that he might be able to use this conjecture as a topic for special research. Looking at Qin Haisheng, who was a little nervous in front of him, Charles showed a kind smile and said, "Kid, can you tell me how you awakened your superpowers?" Qin Haisheng scratched his head and pretended to be at a loss and said, "I don't know. It was when John threw a fireball at me. I felt extreme fear and anger in my heart, and then I don't know what's going on, and I suddenly feel like I can control that fire." Charles nodded and said, That's right. Studies have shown that ordinary people with X genes are indeed more likely to awaken superpowers when they are strongly stimulated and produce extreme emotions. But you, alas, forget it. I guess you can't tell now. Wait a minute, you can write down the details of your awakening process, as well as your understanding and cognition of your own abilities, which is your homework for today. Qin Haisheng had a big head when he heard this, but he could only honestly agree. Who made him a student now? After leaving the dean's office, Qin Haisheng couldn't wait to return to the training ground again. Although he has awakened a superpower, there are at least dozens of superpowers waiting for him to discover. Naturally, he will not be satisfied. For him, there's nothing more cool than picking up attributes. When I returned to the training ground, I found that there were more than half of the mutants who originally practiced their superpowers here. Only 7 or 8 half-year-olds remain. But there are only 2 people who are practicing their superpowers. One of these 2 is a phantom cat and the other is Forget-Me-Not. The phantom cat is walking underground, poking its head out of the lawn every now and then, taking a few breaths and sinking back into the ground. Her ability is to walk through. She can not only pass through walls. It can pass through almost everything, even the human body. It's outrageous. She can even travel through time as she develops her abilities to the limit. In the future, when the mutant group is surrounded and suppressed by the Sentinels, almost all of them will be wiped out. It was the Phantom Cat who used her ability to send Wolverine back to 50 years ago, changing history and canceling the Sentinel Project, thus preserving the living space of mutants. Of course, the Phantom Cat at this time was still very immature. But she is very diligent, and she is still practicing her abilities while everyone else is resting. If it is replaced by a person with a salty personality, it is estimated that this ability can penetrate the wall and escape at most. It's more than enough to be a thief, but it's hard to develop your abilities to the extreme. The other guy is weird. In fact, Omega is not seriously exercising his abilities, but his abilities are passive. Without him actively using it, this ability is also working all the time. And his ability is to reduce the sense of existence and cannot be perceived and remembered by any living being. This is an ability to inject orphans. This poor child was abandoned by his parents in the mall on the day his ability awakened. It's not that his parents think he's a monster. It's that they forgot that they had a son. Omega is also a very non-existent person in the Mutant Academy. Almost no one remembers such a classmate in the academy. Even Professor Charles used his psychic abilities to set an alarm clock in his mind. Remind him every hour. He could only remember that there was such a student in the academy. Originally, Qin Haisheng didn't remember Omega either. But at this moment, he found that there were several bubbles floating next to a guy who looked very passerby. He was attracted by these attribute bubbles, and only then did he realize that there was still a person sitting under the tree. Pick up +3 psychic attribute. From Forget-Me-Not. Pick up +5 to restore stats. From Forget-Me-Not. Pick up +7 ignore ability core. From Forget-Me-Not. Hey! This guy has dropped a lot of attribute bubbles, and it seems that he is about to accumulate enough points for his ability to ignore it. I'm going to awaken a second superpower soon. The reason why Qin Haisheng obtained so many ignorant ability cores. It's all because Omega's ability is passive. Mutants only drop attribute bubbles when using superpowers. It's just that no matter how diligent a person is, it is impossible to exercise superpowers 24 hours a day. But Omega can't. Therefore, Qin Haisheng had picked up attribute bubbles by Omega's side more than once during class or eating. In fact, if Qin Haisheng had been staring at this guy all the time, he might not be able to activate his ability to ignore in a few days. But the problem is, Qin Haisheng picked up the attribute bubble next to Omega every time. We'll also quickly forget this person. Where would you think of following Omega all the time to pick up attributes? Seeing Qin Haisheng walking straight to his side, Omega, a big boy who was eager to be noticed, stood up very excitedly, waved his hand at Qin Haisheng and said, "Qin, congratulations, you've finally awakened your superpowers. Because of that unlucky ability, it is impossible for Omega to have friends." And during this time, the person he had the most contact with was Qin Haisheng. After all, others will ignore his existence, and they won't look at him more when they walk across from him. Only Qin Haisheng often came to his side. This made him have a good impression of Qin Haisheng, and he hated to regard Qin Haisheng as his only confidant. "Oh, thank you, Omega. Now that I'm one of you at last, I'm so happy," Qin Haisheng said and hugged Omega. He's really happy. Omega let him pick up so many attributes at one time. He is definitely a good person. Oh my god. Qin, you actually remember my name. Thank you. Whoa. Hearing Qin Haisheng call out his name, the unlucky child was already moved to tears. Qin Haisheng felt a little embarrassed. In fact, if you don't pick up the attribute bubble, there is a prompt indicating who the attribute fell from. Qin Haisheng definitely couldn't remember Omega's name. Well, although I still remember it now, it will not take more than a minute, and I will definitely forget it. Laughing to death, it's so magical. Qin, you're so handsome. At this time, several little boys came up and began to chat. Those who were very repulsive to Qin Haisheng in the past have changed their attitude towards him significantly at this moment. After all, the current Qin Haisheng has awakened his superpowers, even if he is their kind. And John's guy has a short temper, but he is one of the strongest among the students. Therefore, there are very few little children here who have not been taught by John. This time, John actually ate a turtle at Qin Haisheng's hands, and their favorability towards Qin Haisheng immediately increased greatly. After chatting with a few little kids, Qin Haisheng naturally ignored Omega again. The poor kid called Qin Haisheng twice, but saw that Qin Haisheng didn't react at all. This made him sigh sadly, and sat silently under the tree again. At this time, a beautiful little head poked out of the lawn next to it, and it was the phantom cat. I saw her body jumping up quickly, as if it was. Out of the ground grew a beautiful little girl. "Hey, Qin. Your awakened ability is fire, right? Seems to be even stronger than John's foul-mouthed guy. As the little girl came out, Qin Haisheng suddenly stretched out a hand with glowing eyes and grabbed it directly at the left chest of the phantom cat. Phantom cats were going to be scared stupid. Just watching Qin Haisheng's big hand grab it, he forgot to dodge. But just when the phantom cat reacted and opened its mouth to scream, saw that Qin Haisheng's big hand was just shaking in front of her chest and then retracted again. What are you doing? The phantom cat blinked its beautiful big eyes and glared at Qin Haisheng with a look of resentment and shame. Hearing it in his head, he obtained a full 9 points of the core of his traversing ability. Qin Haisheng was in a good mood and replied casually. Huh? Didn't do anything. It's just to see a big round baby. Well, I can't help but just. In other words, the more attributes contained in the attribute bubble, the larger the volume. Therefore, isn't that silver-white attribute bubble just now a big and round baby? That's the ability to walk. Qin Haisheng has been greedy for a long time. After all, what boy with strong blood has never fantasized? One day, if you have the ability to pierce the wall, you can go to the women's bathhouse. I'm afraid this won't work. It was found to be easy to kill. Even if he wasn't killed, he would have died on the spot. Therefore, it is best to use the wall-piercing technique with the stealth technique, which is the most perfect. Qin Haisheng said this casually, but it made the phantom cat mistakenly think that this guy was driving. So he blushed and snorted, turned and ran away. At this time, Colossus also walked out of the academy building and returned to the training ground. Qin Haisheng hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "How's John? Is the injury serious?" Kali looked at Qin Haisheng twice with a strange look before saying, "He's fine, just a slight burn." However, he seriously violated the rules of the academy, used superpowers on his classmates, and was punished by the dean for copying the academy rules 1,000 times. You should not be able to see him today. When the students heard that they had been punished for copying the school rules 1,000 times, they were all shocked and smacked their tongues. Boy, Xavier Junior Academy has 35 rules. Copy it 1,000 times, and you can't break the handwriting. The good thing is that the physical strength and endurance of the mutants are amazing. Well, that's fine. Okay, Qin. Show us your superpowers. After talking about John, Kali began to return to his role as a teacher. He is a combat teacher in the academy, and there are students who have just awakened their superpowers, so he naturally needs to understand them first. Qin Haisheng did not refuse the request of the teacher Colossus. He turned to face the artificial lake, and before he could do anything, a scorching aura had already begun to rise from his body. Within nearly 100 meters of the surroundings, small red points of light, as if they were soldiers who had received orders, began to gather towards Qin Haisheng's side quickly. In the blink of an eye, a basketball-sized fireball appeared in front of Qin Haisheng out of thin air. Then I saw him wave his hand slightly. The fireball flew out at once. However, the fireball did not fly in a straight line, but circled over the artificial lake and finally smashed like a cannonball into the calm surface of the lake. A loud boom was heard. The lake was immediately blown up by the fireball. It was as if it had rained heavily around the artificial lake, and some of the students who were standing closer to the artificial lake were drenched in soup. Everyone looked at Qin Haisheng with a confused expression. Qin Haisheng was also drenched in soup. However, when his mind moved, the temperature of his body suddenly soared, and in just a few seconds, the water on his clothes and hair had evaporated, and he had returned to his dry and handsome appearance. Wow! Little brother is so handsome. At this time, the little naughty Mary on the side clapped her little hands very excitedly and gave Qin Haisheng a thumbs up. Qin Haisheng smiled embarrassedly at the little naughty. But at this moment, I suddenly felt a hostile gaze. When I turned my head, I found that it was Poppy, the Iceman who came from the side of the academy building after hearing the movement. Qin Haisheng suddenly knew in his heart. Anyone who understands the plot knows that the Iceman's feelings are more chaotic. At first, I was entangled with the little naughty, but later I found that the little naughty's ability was too incomprehensible. As long as you have physical contact with the little naughty, your abilities will be sucked away, and it will make people feel that life is worse than death. Looking for such a female pot friend, even a kiss is a luxury, so what's the point? So this guy began to shift his target again and offered his hospitality to the Phantom Cat. In the original book, this guy is directly a gay. And the sunny and handsome Burning Man John is his good friend. Qin Haisheng was also a little confused. What was the situation in the world he had crossed over? Anyway, Qin Haisheng just beat John, and now he is causing the little naughty to discharge directly at him. So it's strange that Bobby can have a crush on him. But now that Bobby only released hostility to him, and there was no actual behavior, Qin Haisheng couldn't say anything. At this time, Kali said with an amazed face, "Qin, you are very capable. You don't need flames to condense fireballs. And this lethality and flexibility looks better than John. Oh yes, you were able to deprive John of his fireballs for your own use. No wonder you were able to defeat John. It's amazing. In time, I'm afraid your combat power will surpass me sooner or later." Qin Haisheng smiled embarrassedly and said, "Teacher, you've won the prize. I'm just awakening to my superpowers, and there's still a lot to learn from you." In fact, Qin Haisheng only showed the tip of the iceberg his superpowers. If he gathers fire elemental energy with all his might, he can even condense a flame giant out of thin air to fight for himself. As long as the fire elemental is not depleted, the flame giant is immortal. However, Qin Haisheng knows how dangerous this world is, and it is still necessary to leave a whole card in everything. At this time, Bobby on the side finally couldn't help but interject. "I'm sorry, but I don't think he has any superpowers better than John. It looks like it's just ordinary, and at most it can only be used to fry fried fish." As he spoke, he also stretched out his finger and pointed to the dead fish floating on the surface of the lake, which was gradually returning to calm. However, Qin Haisheng didn't care about Bobby's provocation. Instead, I looked at the dead fish on the lake with an excited face. Goose box. There is grilled fish to eat. I have to say that as a person from Huaxia, I am really a little powerless to complain about the food of the Mutant Academy. Every day is bread, milk, vegetables, salad, etc. There are also steaks, but they're completely different from what Qin Hai ate in China in his previous life. Fried half-baked, cut it with a knife until blood gushed, not to mention. And the taste is weird, it's hard to swallow. Therefore, now when he saw so many fish killed by him on the lake, he suddenly felt a little index finger move. And now that he has awakened his flame ability, it is very convenient to grill a fish. This is simply a good skill for killing people and setting fires and traveling at home. So Qin Haisheng, who was interested, didn't care whether he was still taking an ability training class or not, and even ignored Bobby's ridicule, directly found a branch, ran to the lake, and hooked up those floating dead fish. Then, while happily picking up the big fat fish by the lake, he beckoned to the Phantom Cat. "Katie, could you please go to my room and bring me the bag I kept in the second drawer under the bookcase?" The Phantom Cat was stunned for a moment, pointed to his nose in amazement, and said, "You're going to let me go to your room? It's not very good." Qin Haisheng said indifferently, "It's okay, there's nothing unsightly in my room, you can go quickly." "Wait a minute, please eat grilled fish." The Phantom Cat looked at the black fish that was being disemboweled and said, "These fish, can you really eat it?" Qin Haisheng rolled his eyes and said, "Nonsense, this fish is not poisonous, why can't it be eaten?" "Oh well." Phantom Cat is a docile girl who is not too embarrassed to refuse others. What's more, it was still Qin Haisheng, a handsome guy, so he answered, turned around and went to the academy building. And she didn't even ask Qin Haisheng to get the door key. Laughed to death. In this world, there don't seem to be many doors that can stop her Phantom Cat's ability to pass through. Seeing that Qin Haisheng actually came, Colossus's forehead was full of black lines. "You guy. That's not good. I haven't finished class yet," Qin Haisheng said seriously. "These fish have just been blown up and will have to be thrown away if they are not dealt with in time. It's the waste of food that's the most shameful." "Teacher, you said right." Colossus was speechless when he heard this. Thereupon, Soon this outdoor ability training class turned into an open-air barbecue party in seconds. Qin Hai was a native of Northeast China in his previous life. In the Northeast, there is no trouble that cannot be solved by a barbecue. When is the spring flower and autumn moon, the beer is dirty and the waste is a small barbecue. There is wine today and drunk today, and if you don't want to be sad, you will break your stomach. And Northeast people not only go to barbecue restaurants to make skewers. As senior foodies, almost every family must have barbecue grills. In the summer, from time to time, barbecue grills are set up in the courtyard or on the rooftop. All kinds of ingredients are spread on the iron curtain. Hold chopsticks in one hand and a bottle of beer in the other. It's so unpleasant to eat and bake at the same time. As soon as Qin Haisheng was reborn into the beautiful country of this world, he was very unaccustomed to the food here. I especially miss the barbecue in my hometown. Although there is barbecue in the beautiful country, it is completely untasteful. So, Qin Haisheng got some barbecue seasonings from Chinatown. When I'm fine, I set up a barbecue grill at home and get some skewers to satisfy my cravings. Afterward, when he saw on TV that the government department was going to implement the mutant management bill, he was stunned. It turns out that what I have crossed into is not an ordinary parallel world, but a world of American comics. In his previous life, he was a fan of American comics. Think of superheroes who were originally only seen in comics and movies, living right next to them. He could no longer suppress the longing in his heart. Resolutely went to Westchester County alone, and after many inquiries, he found the Mutant Academy. Of course, when he came, he must have brought all the barbecue ingredients he had collected with great difficulty. When he washed and peeled a dozen fat fish, the Phantom Cat also brought back the spices he had brought. Now it's time for his solo show. Cut the fish with a flour knife and then feed it with various spices. What angelica, nutmeg, cinnamon. A total of 12 spices are ground into powder and mixed together. It is perfect for grilling fish. Then brush with a layer of honey and a layer of oil. Then it's just baked. I used to have to use a barbecue, but now it's much easier. Small fireballs flew over and enveloped the whole fish in them. A fish and a fireball, neatly. Then he controlled the temperature of the flame with his mind, and let the flame penetrate perfectly into the belly of the fish, ensuring that the heat can be evenly distributed on every inch of the fish. More than 10 seconds later, with Qin Haisheng beckoning, more than a dozen fireballs disappeared in place, and the thick aroma of grilled fish was like a taste bud bomb, quickly emitting out. Made the students who were still watching, plus the teacher Colossus, couldn't help but swallow their saliva. That's too fragrant, isn't it? I don't know how it tastes yet, but just the smell of the smell is already powerless to refuse. Come on, 1% is welcome. After Qin Haisheng gave in, he directly picked up a big black fish weighing 3 or 4 catties, and then he was not afraid of being hot, so he bit it in one bite. Honey and oil lock in the moisture in the fish and do not evaporate completely. The flame that penetrates into the belly of the fish can roast all the fish bones in a short period of time, and there is no need to remove the fish bones anymore, and they can be eaten directly with the fish. Qin Haisheng took this bite, and the fragrant juice overflowed from the corner of his mouth. He couldn't help but close his eyes in satisfaction. I rub it. The fish grilled with superpowers is delicious, alas. This one is more than 10 times better than the fish I grilled on the barbecue in my previous life. In fact, beautiful Chinese people rarely eat freshwater fish. Because freshwater fish have more fish bones, it is not very convenient to eat, and beautiful Chinese people are afraid of being stuck in their throats by fish bones. In addition, freshwater fish have a stronger earthy smell than marine fish, and they do not use various things to get rid of the peculiar smell in the fish, so freshwater fish naturally taste very bad. So, at first they were a little hesitant. But when he saw that Qin Haisheng was eating so deliciously, the Phantom Cat couldn't help it for the first time. As the saying goes, there is only the wrong name, not the wrong nickname. This girl's nickname has a cat in it, and she loves fish very much. At this moment, smelling the tempting fragrance and then looking at Qin Haisheng's satisfying taste, where can he care about any freshwater fish and saltwater fish? hurriedly grabbed one, and gnawed it without a lady's image. Wow! Delicious, delicious. The phantom cat only took a bite and couldn't help but praise it with a twinkle in his eyes. The other male students were a little unable to put it down, but the girls were generally more gluttonous, and they snatched more than half of the dozen grilled fish in a hurry. Just when a few male students were still hesitating to try it too. But I suddenly heard a very beautiful voice coming from a distance. What smells so good? Hey, aren't you in class? How do you eat grilled fish? Qin Haisheng looked at it when he heard it, but the whole person was stunned. I saw a graceful figure, black hair and black eyes, wearing a tight leather suit and a beautiful Asian girl walking slowly. It's not. Dead girl. How did this man end up in the academy? What the hell am I meowing? Qin Haisheng, who is familiar with the plot of the X-Men, of course knows who the dead girl is. This is Wolverine's nemesis, Colonel Stryker's #1 thug. She is of Asian origin, and her real name is Yuriko Koyama. She has also modified her body like Wolverine. Possessing super self-healing abilities, the bones of his whole body are permeated with Edelman steel, and there are elongated Edelman alloy nails that can destroy any substance. If Qin Haisheng remembered correctly, this woman would have been killed by Wolverine at the Lake Alkali Dam. Forehead. So, hasn't this plot started yet? But it's not right. Even if it wasn't in that plot, this dead woman was also from the non-mutant academy camp. How did she end up here? To be an undercover agent? Just Qin Haisheng looked confused. The dead woman had already walked to the lake with sexy steps, unceremoniously grabbed a piece of roasted death, tore off a piece, and stuffed it into her mouth. Wow! It's been a long time since I've eaten such delicious grilled fish, and it feels like home. The dead woman closed her eyes and reveled for a moment, then looked at Qin Haisheng and asked casually, "You're from Dongying?" "No." Qin Haisheng hurriedly waved his hand to deny it. "I'm from Huaxia. Who are you, little sister? How come I haven't seen you?" The dead woman took her fingers stained with the roasted fish juice into her mouth and sipped it lightly, then licked her tongue and smiled. "My name is Yuriko Koyama, the new teacher at the academy." "What's that?" "It's really an undercover agent at the academy." "But..." In front of Professor Charles, who has a strong psychic ability, who can hide his telepathy. An inexplicable lakeside barbecue party ended in a hurry after the arrival of the dead girl. After class, the students returned to the college building. At this time, Qin Haisheng no longer had the feeling of being excluded. On the contrary, there are always a few girls around him, looking for various reasons to take the initiative to talk to him. No matter what world you're in, the strong will be chased by the opposite sex. After the appraisal of the teacher of Colossus, Qin Haisheng's flame ability is even stronger than John, which can barely be regarded as a strong person in the academy. What's more, this little brother of China is still so handsome, and he is a good fish. What girl can refuse a beautiful and powerful little brother who can cook? Seeing that the little naughty and phantom cat also came to Qin Haisheng's side, bursts of cold air continued to emerge from the body of the Iceman Bobby. So much so that when the group returned to the activity room of the college, everyone thought that the air conditioner here had forgotten to turn off. It's just that he is not as brainless as John. Even if he is unhappy with Qin Haisheng in his heart, it is impossible to openly attack Qin Hai in front of others. It's just that his cold gaze always makes Qin Haisheng feel a chill down his spine. However, when Qin Haisheng turned his head to look, Bobby would immediately turn his head away from his gaze. In fact, Qin Haisheng didn't have any ill feelings towards Bobby. Although it feels like this guy is a little scumbag. But the reason why he is scum may be just to hide his strange sexual orientation. It's a poor man. But if this guy always hates himself so much, then he can't get used to him. Just as Qin Haisheng was pondering how to find a chance to clean up this guy Bobby, he suddenly heard a cry full of surprise from the phantom cat. Qin Haisheng turned his head to look and saw the phantom cat pointing to the picture on the large screen TV in front of him, and he was a little incoherent with excitement. Variant antibodies. Someone has developed an antidote that can inhibit the X gene of our mutants and restore us to the ranks of normal people. Wow, that's great. When the little naughty finished speaking, the whole activity room fell into silence. Except for the little naughty, everyone's faces became extremely solemn. A drug that can inhibit mutant genes has been developed. Isn't that a deadly poison for mutants who are accustomed to having powerful superpowers? Or, of all the mutants, only the little naughty will be happy because of this kind of thing. Because the ability of the little naughty is too special, he doesn't dare to touch others at all. Her first boyfriend was sent away by her kiss. It made her hate her superpowers. If she had a choice, she would prefer to be an ordinary person. And the most shocked person at this moment was Qin Haisheng. He was all too familiar with the scene that was happening in front of him. Worthing Labs, using the serum of mutant Jimmy, created an antibody to the mutant gene. Jimmy's superpower is that he can disable other mutants' superpowers within a range of 10 meters. The potion extracted from her serum, injected into other mutants, causes their superpowers to disappear instantly. This incident completely angered the mutant group led by Magneto, which led to Alcatraz's last stand. But the problem is, the timeline has already reached this time, and the dead girl should have been killed by Wolverine a long time ago. How could the dead girl be in the academy today? Also, if it is the timeline of Last Stand, then the Phoenix female Jean Grey should also die once. After being reborn, the Phoenix girl awakens to her second personality, completely blackened, and also kills Cyclops and Professor Charles. This Nima. The problem is that all three of them are alive and well now. It's messy. It's a mess of all the horses. Qin Haisheng only felt that his brain was buzzing. He originally thought that he could rely on his familiarity with the plot to make a few coquettish operations at that time and show off the faces of those villains when the time came. But what's going on now? Why is it so messy that I can't find my back? I can't be in the world after being reversed by Wolverine? Qin Haisheng suddenly remembered. X-Men. Future twist. Wolverine's consciousness was sent back 50 years by the Phantom Cat and then Professor Charles reads Wolverine's memory. In this way, not only did it solve the disaster of mutant annihilation, the Sentinel Project, it even changed history, allowing Phoenix Girl and Cyclops to avoid the fate of death. It's just that the timeline that was reversed, what happened after that. In the X-Men series, there is no confession. If that's the case, isn't it the end of the calf? The advantage of he, the all-knowing of the Traverser. But that's gone. The mutant students in the activity room were shocked by the news on television. After the Phantom Cat cheered, he saw that no one responded to him, and then he realized it. Others are different from her, and she doesn't want to be deprived of her superpowers. So she had to suppress her excitement and silently quit the activity room, ready to go to the dean to ask for an explanation. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng's heart moved, and he hurriedly followed. Regardless of whether he is in a reverse timeline or not, since the mutant gene suppression agent is still present, then the next plot direction should not change much. In any case, he had to participate in the Battle of Alcatraz in the near future. You know, at that time, there were at least hundreds of mutants in the war. And when mutants are attacking with all their might, it is even easier to drop the ability core. When the time comes, Qin Haisheng doesn't have to do anything else. He can win by picking up attribute bubbles on the battlefield. Despite the dangers of the battle, Magneto's younger brother died a lot. But wealth is in danger. In this world full of crises, if you don't have great strength, you can only become a lamb to the slaughter. He knew very well that the world. But what is special is that there is a god. Don't look at him now has a level 4 superpower. But if the 5 gods really make a move, it is estimated that Charles and Magneto, two good friends who love and kill each other, are tied together, and it is not enough for people to crush each other with one finger. So, what is there for him to be complacent? It's still important to work hard to pick up attributes and keep the dog's head. But if he wants to participate in the Alcatraz battle for a while, then he will have to show enough strength. Otherwise, both Charles and Kali teachers still regard him as a mutant who has just awakened his ability. How could he be allowed to participate in such a dangerous battle at that time? So Qin Haisheng took this opportunity to follow the little naughty and went to the dean's reception room together. Seeing this, Poppy the Iceman's face sank even more like ice. Then, ignoring the surprised eyes of the Phantom Cat on the side, he also stood up and followed. Qin, do you also want to get the mutant gene potion? The little naughty saw Qin Haisheng coming with him and subconsciously asked. But then she reacted, couldn't help but spit out her little pink tongue and said, wrong. You've just awakened your abilities today. And your abilities have no side effects, so you shouldn't want to turn into an ordinary person again. Qin Haisheng smiled, walked a few steps quickly, walked side by side with the little naughty, and said at the same time, I know you aspire to be a normal person. But if you believe me, don't get your hopes up for this potion. The little mischievous was stunned and asked, Why do you say that? Qin Haisheng sighed and said, You should understand why we mutants can awaken their abilities. This is determined by the X gene in our body. You wouldn't think. What kind of medicine can be developed in a laboratory that can fundamentally change your genes? If their potions were that powerful, it would be more than just mutants' genes that would have been changed. Maybe you can just tamper with your genes and turn into a monster. If their potion really works, it must only be suppressed temporarily. I believe it won't be long. Your superpowers will come back. Is that the case? The little mischievous blinked his big eyes and inexplicably felt that Qin Haisheng's analysis was very reasonable. But she still said with some hesitation, But even if I can only temporarily turn back into an ordinary person, I want to give it a try too. Seeing that the little naughty looked like he would not give up if he didn't reach his goal, Qin Haisheng could only shake his head helplessly. He understands the little naughty thoughts. People are social animals, especially girls of this age, and it's hard to accept that others treat her as a monster. Other mutants are only treated as monsters by ordinary people. And her terrible ability makes mutants stay away from her, which makes her live in pain all the time. If there is a way for her to temporarily become an ordinary person again, and she can contact and communicate with others normally, this will be for her. Undoubtedly a great temptation. So, since you can't persuade the little naughty then, actually, you can try to get in touch with me. As he spoke, Qin Haisheng suddenly reached out and touched her slippery face before he could react. No. Seeing this, the little naughty couldn't help but exclaim. At the same time, she felt a fiery warm current coming from Qin Haisheng's hand, bathing her whole body in that warm feeling. It may be that this feeling is so wonderful that the little naughty forgot to avoid Qin Haisheng's palm. She just stood in the corridor in a daze, looking at the Oriental boy in front of her with a shocked and moved face. At this moment, Qin Haisheng is in an indescribable pain and happiness. He could clearly feel. His flame monarch ability is constantly being drained away by the little naughty. But just when he felt a little flustered and scared, he saw that colorful bubbles suddenly fell from the little naughty body. This bubble is so weird. It seems to be very mysterious and powerful. Pick up +7 plunder ability cores. From little naughty. +9 for picking up plunder ability cores. From little naughty. Pick up +5 plunder ability cores. From little naughty. What's going on? Drop so many ability bubbles. The little naughty is simply a prolific battle girl. In just half a minute, Qin Haisheng picked up 6 attribute bubbles from his little naughty here in one go. And only one of them is a recovery attribute bubble. All that's left is the plunder ability core bubble. In one fell swoop, Qin Haisheng gained 35 points of plundering ability core. You must know that before this, Qin Haisheng hadn't been able to get a single wool on the little naughty body for a month. Who makes the little naughty ability too special? Her ability can also be regarded as a passive ability, but unlike forget-me-nots, as long as she controls herself not to touch others, her ability will not be activated. No one wants her to take away her superpowers, and she doesn't dare to touch people casually. This leads to the fact that Naughty is the saltiest fish in the Mutant Academy. And she has never practiced superpowers. How can Qin Haisheng get wool from her? As a result, either you can't get it or you get a lot of it. It's just that the continuous loss of superpowers also makes Qin Haisheng quite uncomfortable. It's almost the same feeling as drowning. Even breathing has become a luxury. However, Qin Haisheng found that he recovered quite quickly. If it weren't for the continuous recovery, the superpower would have been drained by the little naughty a long time ago. Moreover, when Qin Haisheng picked up the plundering ability core that was dropped by the small elimination, Maybe because the attributes of the two are gradually assimilating, and the speed at which his superpowers are being plundered begins to become slower and slower. Just when Qin Haisheng wanted to go all out and see if he could brush up on the little naughty predatory ability, the little naughty finally reacted, glanced at Qin Haisheng, whose face turned pale, exclaimed, and hurriedly took 2 steps back, finally getting rid of Qin Haisheng's claws. Mary. Qin Haisheng let out a long breath and was about to explain to the little naughty. But suddenly I felt a biting chill hit me. As soon as I turned my head, I saw Poppy, the Iceman, staring at a pair of blood-red eyes and roaring angrily to blow a white cold mist towards him. No, Bobby. Seeing that Bobby didn't care about it, the little naughty couldn't help but be anxious and angry when he came up and launched a superpower attack on Qin Haisheng. Under normal circumstances, she didn't know if it was Bobby's frost ability that was stronger or Qin Haisheng's flame ability that was more powerful. But now, Qin Haisheng was sucked dry by her just now. If this is hit by Bobby's superpowers, wouldn't it be 9 deaths? She exclaimed and hurriedly turned sideways in front of Qin Haisheng and at the same time stretched out her hand and waved forward. Suddenly, a huge fireball appeared out of thin air and flew over against the cold mist. Although Bobby was annoyed that Qin Haisheng touched the little naughty face, he had not lost his mind. The cold mist that erupted just now can only freeze people for a while at most, and there is a high probability that they will not be able to die. But the little naughty doesn't know so much. Seeing the cold mist coming, she instinctively used all the flame ability she had just plundered from Qin Haisheng. Then she realized that she seemed to be pushing too hard. Originally, she just wanted to make a fireball. It turned out to be a fireball, like a small volcano. The little volcano slammed into Bobby's face. Poppy was stunned. First, I was shocked by how the little naughty could release such a fierce superpower. On the other hand, I can't believe it. How could a little naughty attack him because of an outsider? However, when he felt that the cold mist he spit out was dispelled by the high temperature of the fireball in an instant, he no longer dared to be careless. He roared wildly at the moment, only to see that his entire body had completely turned into a lump of ice. At the same time, a cold air shot out of his palms and quickly condensed into a thick wall of ice in front of him. However, the ice wall that Bobby had condensed with all his might was only able to be called less than a second. I heard a loud boom, and the ice wall suddenly shattered. The middle part was burned directly through a large hole. Subsequently, the fireball, which seemed to have only decreased by about a fifth, continued to smash straight into Bobby's head. Poppy couldn't help but be frightened when she saw this. After all, before the fireball hit his body, his icy body had already shown signs of melting. If this was directly hit by such a terrifying fireball, his body, can it really hold up? But at this moment of life and death, only a coquettish voice was heard suddenly. Come back. Dash. The speeding fireball trembled slightly at the moment of the sound, and then stopped in midair. The fireball churned rapidly, then slowly shrunk and changed shape. Until finally, the big fireball that was originally comparable to a water tank turned into a small firebird the size of a palm. Oh no! It was supposed to be in the form of a flaming phoenix. Then the little fire phoenix waved its flame wings, slashed an arc in the air, and with a blazing temperature, it slowly flew into the palm of a woman with red hair and a beautiful appearance, who looked to be in her 30s. Qin Haisheng, who was still eating melons on the side just now, couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock when he saw the scene in front of him. After sucking away his superpowers, the little mischievous is still unable to exert the full power of the Flame Monarch. But it's pretty good. At least the threshold of quasi-level 4 can be reached. He thought he would finally be able to eat volcanic ice cream today. But I didn't expect it. In the end, the huge fireball would be so lightly taken into the palm of your hand. There is no doubt that the person who shot is naturally the only 5th-level mutant currently known, Phoenix Female Qin Grey. Qin Haisheng only knew that the blackened Phoenix girl was extremely powerful. It's simply that God blocks and kills God, and Buddha blocks and kills Buddha. But now the Phoenix girl on this timeline is obviously not blackened, but this strength is still a strong horse. Is this the real strength of a 5th level boss? So, is there a possibility? In fact, the Phoenix Girl is a level 5 mutant in her normal state. And once she unleashed all her power, she was even beyond the realm of a 5th level mutant. At this time, in the reception room, a group of mutant bigwigs walked out one after another. In addition to Phoenix Girl, Laser-Eyed Scott, Storm Girl Olaro, Wolverine Logan, and Henry the Beast are all there. Professor Charles also came out in a wheelchair under the urging of the crowd. Seeing the mess in the corridor outside, all the bigwigs were speechless for a while. It's really the big fireball released by the little naughty is too powerful. The high temperature of 3,600 degrees does not need to be directly touched. Even if it is the temperature radiating, it has already burned a big hole in the ceiling. The walls on both sides are also scorched. On the ground was the water stains after the ice wall was burned, and although the two of them only exchanged a trick, they almost demolished the academy building. Professor Charles's expression became serious, and his gaze swept over the 3 people on the scene. I don't want to probe your hearts. Can anyone explain to me what just happened? Poppy hurriedly said when he heard this. It's Qin. He bullied the little naughty, and I couldn't get angry, so I wanted to teach him a lesson. Charles's gaze swept over Qin Haisheng and then said, Since you're going to be angry with the little naughty, why did you fight with the little naughty? Poppy was a little speechless when he heard this. The little naughty had to open his mouth and explain. Professor, Qin didn't bully me. I know. He just wanted to help me. But Bobby probably misunderstood something and attacked Qin without even asking. And Qin's superpowers have just been. I just absorbed it. If I don't make a move, Qin will be very dangerous, so that's why I'm. Hearing the little naughty say this, Charles probably understood what was going on. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but smile helplessly. It turns out that it's all restless youth and damn hormones are doing tricks. It's just that although Charles treats students very kindly, rules are rules. Seeing that the good corridor was destroyed like this, he could only shake his head and say, In that case, then all 3 of you should accept the punishment. Qin Haisheng shuddered when he heard this and hurriedly said, Professor, it's okay to accept the punishment. But, can you not punish me for copying 35 rules of the academy? Charles immediately glared at him and said, What, you still want to tell me about the conditions? Qin Haisheng hurriedly said, It's not about conditions, you can punish me more heavily. Like what? Let me go to the X-Men operation or something. Anyway, as long as you don't let me copy the rules. Huh? Professor Charles was stunned for a moment, and then the corners of his mouth curled again. Not bad. With your strength, you are indeed not weaker than the full members of the X-Men, but all you lack is experience. Since you make this request, then I'll give you a chance. There's a task that we need to do. But Scott and Olaro have more important tasks, and they can't get away with them for the time being, so then. Let Logan take the 3 of you to the test. I didn't expect Charles to really agree to Qin Haisheng's request. Knowing that they could go on missions as X-Men, both Qin Haisheng and Bobby were overjoyed. Only the little naughty face resisted. She didn't want to do any tasks, she just wanted to get the mutant gene suppression potion earlier, so that she could turn into a normal person again. And her abilities are really not very suitable for fighting. After all, even if she could plunder the abilities of mutants, it would be quite difficult for her to touch the enemy in battle. I'm afraid that if I didn't wait for her to get closer, I would have been knocked off by someone else. It's not reliable to let her touch her comrades to gain abilities. Because of the short-term superpowers she obtained through plundering, it is impossible to surpass the original owner. Mutants who are plundered by her will lose their combat effectiveness. Therefore, if she plunders the ability of her comrades to fight, she will only reduce her own combat effectiveness, and the gains will outweigh the losses. It's just that she still respects Professor Charles very much, and when she saw that the professor had already spoken, she didn't dare to refuse. I can only make up my mind and just wait for the back paddling and soy sauce. Bobby was more excited than Qin Haisheng, and at this time, he didn't care about the grievances with Qin Haisheng, but asked with an equation. Professor, what are we going to do? Charles sighed softly, showing a worried look, and only said after a while, Rescue the shapeshifter Raven. How did this connect to the original plot again? Qin Haisheng felt his head grow for a while. The world line has clearly changed. Neither Phoenix nor Cyclops died, and Phoenix Girl did not blacken, and Professor Charles apparently did not die either. But the demonic girl was actually arrested again. Didn't this woman change her hateful attitude towards ordinary people in reversing the future? It is said that he should not be arrested by the forces of the Zhengfu again. But then thinking of the stubborn character of the demon girl, Qin Haisheng was relieved again. This woman, like Magneto, has recognized one thing, the kind that 9 cows can't pull back. In the plot of Reversing the Future, the demonic girl has learned from Wolverine about what will happen in the future, because she killed Trask, the creator of the Sentinel. But the woman still insisted that the guy deserved to die, and no one could stop him. Even if I changed my mind under the influence of Professor Charles, but after that, she will definitely go further and further down the road of death. After the task was confirmed, Professor Charles immediately prepared to turn on the brainwave intensifier. He only learned from the beast that the demonic girl had been captured, but to find out where it was, he had to use a brainwave booster. Qin Haisheng's eyes immediately lit up. If Professor Charles wants to search for the traces of the demon girl, he must use his superpowers with all his might. In this way, if you follow him, you will have a chance to pick up the core bubble of the psychic ability dropped by Professor Charles. Qin Haisheng is still very jealous of Professor Charles's ability. Even a guy as coaxed as Magneto has to buckle an ugly helmet all day long, just to prevent his good friend from plotting against him. How could Qin Haisheng not be afraid? Although the two are in the same camp now, but in case. One day, the professor went crazy again. After all, this big guy has a history of attacking humans all over the world, and he has Alzheimer's disease in his old age, and he destroyed most of the X-Men by himself. And if you want to prevent Charles's psychic ability, you can either learn Magneto to make a helmet that isolates brainwaves, or just like the Phoenix Girl, she also has similar psychic abilities, so she is naturally not afraid of Professor Charles's psychic ability attack. For Qin Haisheng, it is undoubtedly the latter that is more suitable. So Qin Haisheng hurriedly said that he wanted to see the brainwave intensifier. Professor Charles did not refuse. He usually uses a brainwave intensifier, and almost every time the X-Men are watching, which is not a problem. When the group walked into the spherical instrument space full of science fiction, Qin Haisheng felt a deep shock. Especially when Professor Charles puts on his helmet and activates his abilities to start looking for the witch. The red light and shadow in the sky intertwined with each other, and countless voices poured into his mind, which made Qin Haisheng feel an inexplicable sense of panic. However, at this moment, Qin Haisheng saw that attribute bubbles began to fall from Charles's body, which suddenly lifted his spirits, and he couldn't care about being scared anymore. It's just that. The only regret is that Charles drops all colorless attribute bubbles. In line with the idea that grasshoppers are also meat, Qin Haisheng still picked up all those attribute bubbles. It turned out that these attribute bubbles are all of spiritual attributes. Speaking of which, among the 6 basic attributes, spiritual attribute bubbles are still quite rare. After all, most mutants' abilities are not known for their spirits. The attributes that Qin Haisheng usually picked up the most were strength and recovery. If you have spiritual attributes, you may not be able to pick them up once a day. This time, I picked it up all at once. As time passed, Qin Haisheng picked up 7 or 8 spiritual attribute bubbles in a row. Finally, I saw a large, round, colorful bubble appear. It's not easy for me to go. This is the second course I've ever found on Professor Charles. These colorful bubbles are the core bubbles of the psychic ability. Qin Haisheng had also gotten it once before, so he naturally recognized it. Pick up the psychic ability core plus 7. From Professor X, when the core of the psychic ability accumulates 800 points, the psychic ability can be activated. Finally got enough 10 psychic ability cores. But as soon as he saw the standard for activating the ability, Qin Haisheng's heart was half cold again. It's a long way off. Unless Qin Haisheng follows Professor Charles every day in the future and accompanies the other party here every time. Otherwise, I'm afraid that if he stays up for another 10 or 8 years, it's hard to say whether he can accumulate enough spiritual ability cores. Just when Qin Haisheng was picking up the bubbles and picking them up, Professor Charles, who was in a wheelchair, looked moved and suddenly said, "Found it. On the XJ highway, the coordinates are. The target is always moving. You guys set off immediately on a Blackbird fighter. It should be possible to stop them near the town of Dangle in half an hour." With that, Professor Charles took off his helmet. Naturally, no new bubbles would fall from his body. Qin Haisheng nodded with some regret, and then followed behind Wolverine and walked towards the underground parking garage of the Academy building. Qin Haisheng still remembers that in the original plot, the demon girl was captured by the Shofu forces. In order to avoid being robbed, he simply didn't put the demon girl in prison. Instead, she and some mutants, such as Red Tank and Doppelganger, were locked up in an elongated container truck. Now it seems Wolverine's soul crossing though caused some changes. But history is always strikingly similar. Or is it the will of the world trying to correct the wrong? However, in the original plot, it was Magneto and Burning Man John who rescued the demon girl and the others. It's just that the demon girl was hit by a mutant gene suppression agent shot by the prison guard in order to protect Magneto, and she lost her superpowers. And Magneto, Na Lao Dang, while saying thank you to the demon girl for saving him, abandoned the demon girl mercilessly. Means that the demon girl who has turned back into an ordinary person, and he is no longer a person all the way. Qin Haisheng didn't know if he could meet Magneto Na Lao Dang this time. If he meets him, he has to try to see if he can brush out this old Dang's superpowers. As long as Magneto's superpowers are brushed out, he must be given a few injections of mutant gene suppression potions, so that he can also feel what it is like to become an ordinary person and then be abandoned. The group set off on the Blackbird fighter plane, and it only took more than 20 minutes to arrive at the town of Dangle and land on a grain field outside the town. I didn't expect this guy Bobby the Iceman to actually drive a fighter. Apparently because his ability is special and his potential is huge. So although he is still a student of the Mutant Academy, he has been trained as a reserve force for the X-Men. Time was pressing, and after a few people got off the plane, they quickly walked through a wheat field and came to the road in front of the mountain. When they flew in the sky just now, they had already seen the convoy where the demonic girl was being held. The convoy is expected to arrive in about 3 minutes. Wolverine Logan, as the captain of this mission, looked around for a while and immediately jumped to the hillside on the opposite side of the road. Then he flashed his Erdman alloy wolf claws and clicked at a large tree. His pair of claws are almost the hardest metal on Earth, and these claws are even more indestructible. A few claws down, and a deep gap was cut into a large tree. Then Uncle Wolf burst out with terrifying power and slammed into the big tree. With a bang, the tree broke from its roots and fell down with a bang, just across the road, completely blocking the road. In the original plot, Magneto blocked the road and robbed people, so he didn't have to work so hard at all. Standing in the middle of the road, with a wave of his big crumpled hand, the escort trucks flew up in the air and rolled down to the side of the road like broken toys. Uncle Wolf is well known among the X-Men, but after all, he is only a 3rd-level mutant. Compared with the 4th-level boss Magneto, it's not a little worse. The road had just been blocked with a large tree, and a convoy of 7 vehicles came into view. The other party saw that there was a roadblock in front of him, so he hurriedly stopped the car from a distance. Then one by one, they jumped out of the car in full gear, hid behind the car, and shouted a warning with a loudspeaker. Qin Haisheng and the 3 of them didn't squeak, and looked at Uncle Wolf at the same time. Uncle Wolf frowned slightly, and didn't speak, but just clenched his fists hard, letting his shiny Edmund alloy claws glow in the sun. Then he took a step and walked directly towards the convoy in front of him. Uncle Wolf is reckless enough. This is to want to rush directly. Uncle Wolf is indeed qualified to be reckless. After all, he has a near-immortal body, and his head and heart can't die if he is pierced by bullets, so what is there to worry about in the face of such a mortal armed force? However, Qin Haisheng suddenly remembered the fate of the demon girl in the original plot and hurriedly stopped him and said, "Uncle Wolf, don't be impulsive. They may have mutant gene suppression potion bullets in their hands, and once you get hit by this bullet, you will lose your superpowers. The so-called immortal body is also one of the abilities of mutants. Once Uncle Wolf is hit by such a bullet, then he can basically stop cooking. It is possible to even be killed by ordinary people." Hearing this, Logan was clever and hurriedly took 2 steps back and then said in a deep voice, "Poppy is in charge of defending with an ice wall and Qin. Then it's up to you to attack." As he spoke, the armed men on the opposite side had already started firing. The clicking bullets flew like a dense hail, overwhelmingly towards several people. Bobby still didn't drop the chain at the critical moment. With a loud shout, he pushed his hands forward. An extremely thick white mist gushed out, instantly condensing into a thick wall of ice in front of several people. The bullets hit the ice wall, smashing out craters, and cobweb-like cracks began to appear on the ice walls. But Poppy was still thickening the wall of ice in front of him, so the bullets didn't break the wall at all. And at this moment, Qin Haisheng made a move. He closed his eyes slightly at first, and then mobilized the fire elements around him to quickly condense a flame bird above his head. This move was still Qin Haisheng's idea after seeing the Phoenix Girl make a move. Among the abilities of the Flame Monarch that he awakened, in addition to the regular attack methods such as fireballs and fire dragons, there are only a few flame giants condensed with the fire element. But after seeing the Phoenix Girl shoot, he realized the bird-like flame attack is not as powerful as the flame giant in terms of destructive power. But it's a little more flexible. It's just that he was embarrassed to copy the homework directly. Instead of condensing a fire phoenix, he made a firebird that looked like a crow. The flame raven was condensed from pure fire elemental and looked like a real entity. The moment the fire crow took shape, it flapped its wings and flew up, hovering ahead and killing the group of armed men. But that's not all. When the first fire crow flew out, Qin Haisheng quickly condensed the second fire crow above his head. Then the third, the fourth. When Qin Haisheng condensed 6 fire crows in a row, he finally felt that the distraction and control of the 6 fire crows had almost reached his limit, and he stopped. Then he concentrated on controlling the 6 fire crows and frantically attacked the armed men in front of him. Seeing this, the armed men on the opposite side turned their guns and fired at the 6 fire crows. But fire ravens fly so fast that they are hard to aim. And even if you hit, it's useless. Bullets will quickly pass through the raven and will do little damage. Seeing that this thing couldn't be killed, everyone could only hide behind the car with their heads shrunk in surprise. But what's the use? Again, this is not a bullet. Only bullets can only attack in a straight line. But fire crows can fly. How can you hide behind a car? Uncle Wolf and the others didn't expect Qin Haisheng's fire control ability to play like this, and they couldn't help but widen their eyes. It wasn't until I saw those armed men in the distance through the transparent ice wall that they were pounced on by the fire crow and immediately fell down screaming all over their bodies. Uncle Wolf came back to his senses and hurriedly admonished, "Qin, try not to kill." "Okay, Uncle Wolf." Qin Haisheng responded very happily. He didn't want to kill anyone. After all, these are the people of the Zhengfu forces in front of them. Even if someone should be killed, they are also the real people who hold the real power behind them, and these pawns are just acting according to orders. He is also well aware of the philosophy of the X-Men, led by Professor Charles, who have been trying their best to ease the conflict between mutants and ordinary people, and do not want to escalate it too much. If you want to save the demon girl now, you will go on a killing spree and slaughter all the armed personnel of these Zhengfu forces. The official attitude towards mutants will only become more and more ruthless. Therefore, Qin Haisheng was very measured from the beginning. When those fire crows pounced on the enemy, the temperature was not very high. Otherwise, if the temperature is raised to 3,600 degrees, then this fire crow will only need to pounce on people. You can burn people until only ashes remain. At this moment, The armed men are basically just on fire with flammable materials such as clothes and hair. When the clothes on their bodies were almost burned, Qin Haisheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. I saw that the flames on those people suddenly left their bodies and merged into the fire crows. The remaining militants, whose clothes had been burned and their eyebrows and hair burned, lay on the ground. It's as if they've just crawled out of the coal kiln. Because the flame temperature is so low, most people have only minor burns. However, the clothes were burned out, and the guns in their hands were taken care of by Qin Haisheng, and the pipes were burned. So, these people have basically lost the ability to continue fighting. After luckily picking up a life, they all screamed and crawled to hide in the grass on the side of the road. In a short period of time, at least 20 or so armed men who got out of those cars were killed by the 6 fire crows released by Qin Haisheng. That's really not left. Anyone with shorts or something on them would have a fire crow flying over and clicking on the bird's nest. Who can stand this Nima? So someone saw that the situation was wrong, so he simply took the initiative to take off his shorts and throw them on the ground. Then he squatted there with his hands raised in surrender. Seeing the scene, the little naughty and pretty face turned red, and he couldn't help but glared at Qin Haisheng lightly and scolded, "You are so bad." Then he hurriedly turned his head away, not daring to look again. Anyway, this time she came to make soy sauce. Her broken ability, especially in the face of ordinary people, can't play a role at all. Click dash. When the little mischievous said the sentence, "You are so bad," the ice wall in front of Poppy suddenly appeared, and there were countless cracks. It was like the sound of his heart breaking. Anyway, the armed personnel of the convoy have basically been dealt with by Qin Haisheng. Therefore, Poppy hadn't continued to unleash his abilities to thicken the ice wall for a long time. I just watched the ice wall in front of me shatter and turn into ice cubes, and I didn't pay attention to it. Just peeked at the little naughty with a resentful face. Uncle Wolf glanced at a few young people, the corners of his mouth twitched and he didn't speak, but continued to walk forward. Just now, he was almost playing soy sauce like a little naughty, and he felt a little shameless. Next, when you enter the van to save people, you will definitely face some obstacles. But in close combat, he is better at this. However, the group didn't go far. Then I saw a man turn out of the back of the van. And this man carried a single grenade launcher on his shoulder. The man was obviously prepared, and the moment he appeared, he aimed the barrel of the cannon in the direction of several people and fired a grenade directly at him. Seeing this, Uncle Wolf's face changed, and he yelled, "Get out of the way." Then he went in the opposite direction from which the grenade had come. It seems that Uncle Wolf is going to rely on his immortal body to take this cannonball again. Saying, "With this howitzer alone, it will definitely not be able to blow up Uncle Wolf. It's just that the pain when the body is torn is not less at all." However, in this team, Wolverine is the only senior and teacher, and in this case, he can only rush to the front to ensure that the 3 little ones are not harmed. However, how could Qin Haisheng watch Uncle Wolf block the cannonballs again? Seeing this, he hurriedly waved his hand. Suddenly, a fireball flew out at a faster speed than a cannonball. And the fireball crossed an arc in the air, bypassing Uncle Wolf in front. Then it hit the flying grenade hard. Boom dash with a loud bang. The powerful kinetic energy generated by the explosion of the fireball, coupled with the extreme heat of the flames, instantly caused the gunpowder filled in the grenade to explode. Suddenly, a huge ball of fire formed and spread in all directions. The nearest Uncle Wolf burned his beard and hair curly. Seeing this, Poppy the Iceman was not far behind and hurriedly let out a chill. Immediately, the guy who carried the cannon barrel froze all over his body and fell straight down. Uncle Wolf wiped a handful of the black ash from his face that was smoked by the fireworks, coughed lightly and rushed forward, pulling open the back door of the van. Click dash. As soon as the door opened, a string of bullets hit. Fortunately, Uncle Wolf was prepared. And he was also worried about whether the other party would fire mutant gene suppression bullets, so he didn't dare to use his body to hard connect. I saw that his figure flashed slightly, and with a wave of 2 steel claws at the same time, all the bullets that were fired at him flew out. Then, before the armed man could attack again, he had already dodged and jumped into the car, kicked the armed man directly in the head, causing him to faint to death. There was also a guard in the carriage. But the demon girl who was locked in the iron fence took advantage of a big flying leg and strangled her to death. Then, without being rescued, the demonic girl had already taken the key from the guards herself, opened the iron gate, and walked out. "Hey, Logan, thank you for saving me." The demon girl who had recovered her appearance came over with a big smile and gave Uncle Wolf a big hug. In the original plot, the relationship between the demon girl and Wolverine would not be so good. Seemingly. This is because Wolverine laid some emotional foundation with the demon girl when he reversed the future battle. However, at this time, Uncle Wolf was most likely still in a state of amnesia and did not remember what happened decades ago. Therefore, in the face of the demon girl's embrace, he was very vigilant and even confiscated the Edelman steel claw on his hand. The demon girl pursed her lips and didn't care, and then beckoned to Qin Haisheng and the others, which was considered to have been said hello. Looking at the graceful figure of the demon girl, who is completely uncovered by clothes, Qin Haisheng secretly screamed in his heart that it was a pity. You know, this female devil can change everything. If any man can marry her, he can easily realize his dream of changing brides one day. However, Qin Haisheng also knew. The shapeshifter grew up with Professor Charles. It's definitely for Grandma. Qin Haisheng is no longer greedy. It's impossible to be hungry enough to think anything about her. But if you can brush out her transformation ability, it will be amazing. You know, the transformation ability of the demon girl is not only able to change her appearance. Even the body shape can be completely changed. From a strong man of 2 meters and 3 meters to a little girl less than 1 meter tall, she can change whenever she wants. Even the matching clothes can be conjured up for you. It's magical. If you can get this superpower, there are so many ways to play. Because of the ability to covet the demon girl, Qin Haisheng is different from Bobby and Little Naughty, who seem a little shy. He took the initiative to lean in and said, "Hello, Senior. My name is Qin Haisheng, and I am from Huaxia. Ability is fire. I've heard of the name of my predecessors for a long time, and I've always admired it very much, and today I finally met the real person." The demon girl looked at Qin Haisheng with some astonishment and said with a smile in her eyes, "Senpai? That's an interesting name. How do you feel when you see my real person? Don't you think I'm a little scary?" Qin Haisheng shook his head again and said, "How so? You're pretty good-looking and I've heard that you can change into anyone at will, is that true?" The demonic girl pouted and smiled and said, "Of course. Want to see it?" As she spoke, her appearance immediately changed from bottom to top. In the blink of an eye, she was originally out of sight, but she became the same clothes as Qin Haisheng. And her height also increased, and her appearance began to change rapidly. In less than 2 seconds, another Qin Haisheng suddenly appeared in the carriage. Qin Haisheng's eyes suddenly widened, and he came to this person who looked exactly like himself. I looked up and down, as if I was very curious. In fact, he was waiting for the demon girl to drop the attribute bubbles. It's just a pity. He looked at it for a long time, and looked at all the demon girls, and he didn't see any attribute bubbles falling. Actually, this is normal. Mutants don't say that as soon as they use their abilities, attribute bubbles will fall. There is only one bubble battle girl like Little Naughty. Usually, Qin Haisheng squatted on the training ground, and for an average hour, it was not bad to be able to pick up 1 or 2 attribute bubbles on a mutant. Although as long as the demon girl changes into someone else's appearance, it is equivalent to using superpowers all the time, but it is not necessarily that attribute bubbles will drop so quickly. The demon girl pushed Qin Haisheng aside with some collapse, and then quickly returned to her original appearance. Then he glanced at Qin Haisheng and said, "Little friend, I think you're weird. If you keep staring at me like that, your girlfriend will be jealous." As she spoke, she also raised her eyebrows at the Little Naughty. The Little Naughty blushed when she heard this, but before she could explain, she saw that Bobby on the side had already hurriedly said, "Mary isn't his girlfriend, don't talk nonsense." The demonic girl pursed her lips and said disapprehantly, "You're an Iceman, aren't you? It seems that you are not as interesting as this little guy named Qin." "Uh-huh. If it were me, I would definitely choose Qin, not you." Poppy immediately clenched her fists in anger at her words. But for the female devil in front of him, he really didn't dare to make a mistake. Although he felt that in terms of positive combat power, he could beat 10 demon girls. But who let this female devil be Professor X's childhood sweetheart? "I can't afford to mess with it. Can't afford to mess with it." Wolverine shook his head when he saw this and said, "All right. Since Raven is fine, let's go back to the academy." "Wait a minute." At this time, the demon girl stretched out her hand and pointed to the 2 alloy cabinets next to her and said, "There are 2 mutants locked up here, too. I think I should help them, by the way." Wolverine didn't have a big deal and immediately showed his Edmund claws. Titica twice, and the 2 alloy cabinets were cut open. Then I saw a handsome man in his 30s standing behind the first door. The demonic girl also introduced. "This guy is called the Doppelganger, and it is said that he robbed 7 banks at the same time." I saw the man lift his leg and walk out of the alloy cabinet. But what's amazing is, there was another person in the alloy cabinet who looked exactly like him. Then the second doppelganger stepped out of the alloy cabinet, followed by the third, the fourth. In the end, 7 doppelgangers came out, and they were all about to fill the relatively spacious container car. These men who look exactly the same have become one again. It exploded. Burst the skill bubble. After Qin Haisheng saw this guy's dazzling performance, he suddenly dropped 2 orange bubbles with a double image, and he couldn't help but feel excited. Immediately leaned over to the doppelganger and reached out for it. Picked up the 2 bubbles that only he could see. Pick up the clone ability core +6. From the doppelganger. Pick up the clone ability core +9. From the doppelganger. Not bad, not bad. Doppelganger ability. Qin Haisheng gained a new ability core, and his heart felt a sense of joy. "I just don't know when I'll be able to brush out this superpower. It seems that if there is a chance in the future, I will have to let this guy practice more." He knew that the ability of this doppelganger was actually a bit of a chicken rib. Because the doppelganger has no other abilities except for being able to separate multiple clones. And the strength of each doppelganger is even weaker than his body. His body is similar to that of an ordinary person, and even a boxer can easily beat him down. So, no matter how many clones he splits up, he is just a weak chicken, the difference between a group of weak chickens. But what if Qin Haisheng awakens this ability? Wow, caca. I can't imagine it. Standing in another alloy cabinet was a large man over 2 meters tall, like a half-cut iron tower, with a helmet on his head. Moreover, he was not only locked in an alloy cabinet, but also had several additional steel locks on his body, apparently for fear that he would escape from prison. The demon-shaped goddess said with some seriousness, "This guy isn't actually a mutant, but he has more terrifying powers than a mutant. And bodies that cannot be destroyed." Wolverine's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard this. He was clearly a little unconvinced. Although it is said, the guy in front of him was indeed much bigger than him. But who is he? Not only does he have a pair of wolf claws, but he also has the power of a beast. Will this guy be more powerful than himself? The red tank looked like an Iron Man, looked at a few people and said impatiently, "You saved me because you wanted me to help you, right? It doesn't matter." "Damn, now help me get out now, I'm going to pee." Wolverine shook his head a little speechlessly, and then with a continuous wave of his Erdman alloy claws in both hands, he slashed all the steel locks on the red tank. The red tank cheered, jumped out of the alloy cabinet, and jumped out of the alloy cabinet. I'm afraid this guy weighs at least 400 or 500 pounds. It didn't matter if he jumped like this, the whole carriage shook a few times. That's when Qin Haisheng really found that the guy who had been kicked out by Wolverine before had woken up at some point. At this moment, he quietly pulled out a special pistol from his body and attached a strange magazine. It's just that. Before this guy could raise his gun and sneak attack a few people present, Qin Haisheng had already flicked his fingers, and a small flame flew over quickly, hitting the guard's right hand with the gun. The The burning pain in his wrist caused the guard to exclaim, and the gun in his hand also fell. Qin Haisheng immediately stepped forward and took the gun in his hand, and then removed the magazine on it. Said with a slight squint of his eyes, "That's it. Mutant gene suppression agent. If this guy succeeds in sneaking up just now, whoever hits him will have to lose all his superpowers." SHHHH. When the demon girl and the others heard this, they all gasped. Then the demon girl and Wolverine glanced at each other, and they couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. There are two of them, one in his 100s and the other in his 70s. As a result, at this time, there was no young man who was cautious and almost capsized in the gutter. If this is deprived of superpowers by an ordinary person with a potion, wouldn't it? Everything is ruined. Among the crowd, only the little naughty one showed a very surprised look, looking at Qin Haisheng with burning eyes. The gun in his hand, his eyes full of longing. Qin Haisheng sighed secretly. He knew the little naughty wanted it, but... I haven't brushed out the plundering ability from this bubble battle G. How can I make her an ordinary person? Hey, but if I really brush out her predatory ability, will it be the same as her? As long as I touch someone, it will make the other person fall into a state of stiffness? If that's the case, then I won't have a girlfriend in the future. Even if you have a girlfriend, you can't do negative distance exercise, which is especially meow. It's not the same as letting me become a monk directly. Thinking of this possibility, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. I found that this bubble battle G had whoosh off the bubbles on his body, and he felt quite happy. Now that I think about it, I was interrupted by Bobby's guy at the time otherwise. It's time for you to think about what the name of the law is. So, Bobby is actually a good guy. Come to think of it. Qin Haisheng couldn't help but cast a grateful glance at Bobby. Just show poppy hair. This guy doesn't have the right look in his eyes. Could it be that this Oriental kid is actually one of my fellow travelers? So, Bobby looked at Qin Haisheng's gaze and suddenly lost his previous hatred and became warm. Now I can't give Qin Haisheng a whole thing directly. I'm rubbing, this can't really be a gay, right? But looking at his jealousy because of his little naughty, it doesn't look like he's pretending. So, this can't be a two-way plug, right? I'm Nima, or this guy can play. Just when Qin Haisheng was still suspicious here, the demon girl had already dealt with the clone and the red tank in a few words. All right, you two come with me. From now on, everyone will be members of the fraternity. What's the situation? Wolverine and the others were all black question marks all of a sudden. Wait a minute, Uncle Wolf said with some annoyance. Raven, you just got rescued by our X-Men. Now you're going to take the two of them away. Isn't that a bit unreasonable? Who knew that the demon girl turned her face directly and said, I'm sorry, but I actually deliberately let the Zhengfu forces catch me. The purpose is to investigate the source of the mutant gene suppression drug. It's a good thing you only came to save me today. Otherwise, if it had been one day earlier, it would have ruined my big deal. Wolverine's eyes widened when he heard this, and then he asked, What the hell is going on with that potion? Where did it come from, and you investigated it? The demonic girl nodded, but did not elaborate, but diverted the topic. Of course, I still have to thank you for saving me. Originally, our plan was that after I investigated the information about the potion, Eric would personally come and rescue me. And these two friends, which we have been planning to recruit for a long time. But what I didn't expect was, Eric was plotted and arrested, so... Well, thank you guys. But now I have to bring someone to save Eric. What's going on? Magneto has been arrested again. Okay. Magneto and the Shapefit are worthy of being little experts at death. Especially Lawan. I'm afraid he hasn't spent half of his life in prison, right? Qin Haisheng felt a little powerless to complain. He originally thought that this time he came to save the demon girl, and he might meet Lawan, but this guy, still in jail. Is the next plot messed up again? Can Lawan unite nearly 100 mutants to attack the Worthing lab on Alcatraz Island? The big scene you are looking forward to, an opportunity to wholesale attribute bubbles, don't lose it. Wolverine didn't want the demonic girl to take the doppelganger and red tank away, but when he learned that Magneto had been captured, he couldn't help but hesitate. He didn't have a crush on the old guy. If the changeling asked him to save Magneto now, he would most likely refuse. However, now the demonic wants these two newly rescued mutants to go with her to save Magneto. If he still wants to stop it, in case the old man really has an accident because of this, I am afraid that he will not be able to explain it to Professor Charles even if he turns back. The relationship between Professor Charles, Magneto, and the demonic girl has always been quite chaotic. However, Uncle Wolf knew that if any of them were in danger, the other two would desperately go to the rescue. So, Uncle Wolf could only wave his hand and say, "That's okay. Take them away." Then he beckoned to Qin Haisheng and the others. "Let's go. The mission is complete, and the rest has nothing to do with us. Let's go back to the academy." Upon hearing this, Polky and Little Naughty jumped out of the carriage with Uncle Wolf. But Qin Haisheng hesitated. Go save Magneto. It's definitely going to be another big war. And in the mutant war, it is possible for him to increase his strength rapidly. Though, Qin Haisheng has been picking up attributes in the Mutant Academy, and it's not impossible. But the problem is that in the Mutant Academy, you can't pick up the ability attributes of Demon Girl and Magneto. Oh yes, now add a doppelganger. The skill of the doppelganger can only be a waste-wood ability in the doppelganger himself. Changing to any mutant above level 3, as if he had the ability to have this infinite clone at the same time, he would have already taken off on the spot. That's right, Qin Haisheng is a member of the X-Men camp. And Magneto's mutant brotherhood can't be said to be completely opposite camps, and it's pretty much the same. But Qin Haisheng didn't really go to the enemy, he went to gather wool. If you have the opportunity to gather the enemy's wool, what is there to be polite? So, Qin Haisheng didn't pay attention to the Little Naughty call, but leaned in front of the demon girl again and asked, "Raven Sr., Magneto is also my idol. Can you take me with you to save him?" "Huh? Are you serious?" As she spoke, the demonic girl turned her head in surprise and glanced at Wolverine under the car. Uncle Wolf's face darkened, and he hurriedly said sharply, "Qin, don't make jokes. Now come down at once and follow me back to the academy." Qin Haisheng waved his hand indifferently and said, "It's okay, I'm just going to sign a name with Magneto, and I'll go back to the academy by myself when I'm done." Uncle Wolf was so angry that his beard straightened, but he couldn't do anything about Qin Haisheng, because he discovered, if you really fight, you won't necessarily be this kid's opponent. Therefore, he is very undignified as the temporary captain. Seeing that Qin Haisheng was actually going to go with the demon girl, the little mischievous felt very disappointed for a while, and couldn't help but look at Qin Haisheng pitifully, hoping that the other party would change his mind. It's just that. Even she didn't know whether she was reluctant to Qin Haisheng or the mutant gene suppression pill in Qin Haisheng's hand. After Uncle Wolf and the others left, Qin Haisheng followed the demon girl and got out of the car. When I came face to face with the demon girl before, I didn't feel much of it. But this time, following behind the female devil, I could clearly see her perfect waist curve, and I couldn't help but panic. "I'll go." "No, you can't. This is an old grandmother, and I can't be tempted by her." "Absolutely not." Thinking of this, he hurriedly grabbed a few steps, walked side by side with the demon girl, and then asked, "Raven Sr., can you turn yourself into whatever you want? Or, what else can you conjure up besides your body?" The demonic girl glanced at him and asked with an unkind expression, "What the hell do you want to say?" Qin Haisheng looked at her for a moment, and then persuaded, "Since you become someone else, you can change into different clothes." "That? When you change back to your own appearance, how can you not change your clothes? You admit to seeing each other like this. It's going to make me embarrassed to look at you." The demon girl stopped, staring at Qin Haisheng with a pair of eyes for a long time. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng did not show weakness and also looked at the demon girl without blinking. After a long time, the demon girl snorted lightly and said, "Aren't you embarrassed to look at me?" The corners of Qin Haisheng's mouth twitched and said, "I mean, I'm embarrassed to look at your body. Your body is so good, I don't dare to look at it. But just looking at your face, it's still not a burden." The demon girl couldn't help but laugh and said, Okay, I'm sorry for you." An old woman in her 70s was actually praised by a young man for her good figure, and she was quite happy in her heart. The shapeshifter is only a few years younger than Charles, but she doesn't look as old as Professor Charles, possibly because of her superpowers. Not only is she in great shape, but her appearance has not aged at all. It is not clear to see the appearance of a blue body now, but no one who sees her will associate her with an old lady of 70. Even a 70-year-old lady is a woman. And there is nothing that a woman does not like to be praised. Thereupon, the demon girl was unprecedented, and for the first time, after restoring her original appearance, she actually changed into a beautiful white suit on her body. Not to mention, blue skin, white suit, against each other, there is an unusually bewitching beauty. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng immediately praised the demon girl again without hesitation. All kinds of compliments, without duplication at all. The clones and Red Tank who followed behind couldn't help but glance at each other and shook their heads together. How can such a guy come out? It's a shameless example. They directly requisitioned a jeep at the front of the previous escort team. The clothes of the armed men were burned, and a few people were still crammed into the car, trying to turn around and drive away. As a result, the demon girl pulled the car door open, and one look went down. The group of little black men who had nothing on their bodies obediently got out of the car and ran to the grass on the side of the road and squatted down. Seeing that there was a big tree on the road in front of him, the Red Tank didn't need to be greeted by others and directly stepped forward to hug the thick trunk. The big tree, which weighed several tons, seemed to be no different from the big radish in the ground in the hands of the Red Tank. He picked it up with a light lift and then threw it hard. Whoosh boom dash. The tree was immediately thrown more than 20 meters away and landed in a wheat field. Shall we? Seeing that the demon girl sat in the driver's seat, Qin Haisheng decisively sat in the co-pilot seat and asked casually at the same time. The demon girl glanced at Qin Haisheng and shook her head slightly. You'll know when you get there. Along the way, Qin Haisheng's gaze would always glance at the demon girl from time to time. That? The demon girl was a little skeptical that this young man with strong blood was really kind to her. That's what it means. How did she know that Qin Haisheng was waiting for her to drop bubbles? Otherwise, he would be so idle. Why would he have to let the demon girl conjure up a set of clothes? The reason is, even if the demon girl does not change into someone else's appearance, but changes a set of clothes on her body, it is equivalent to using superpowers all the time. Isn't it possible to farm attribute bubbles infinitely? It's just that the probability of the bubble falling is really a bit low, and after driving for more than 2 hours, she finally dropped an attribute bubble on her body. It turned out to be a stamina attribute bubble. But Qin Haisheng was not discouraged. Anyway, let's keep it first. Speaking of which, the doppelganger person's doppelganger ability core seems to be quite easy to drop, and it's okay to go back and find a chance to brush that guy's ability first. An hour later, when Qin Haisheng picked up a power attribute bubble again, the demon girl finally drove to a small farm in the middle of nowhere. Then he said hello to an old man with a white beard and led a few people into a factory-like building at the back of the farm. I saw a small helicopter parked here. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng could only sigh again and again. This world is so crazy. Even the farming family has an airplane, can you believe it? When it was dark, they finally arrived at the destination of this trip, Luoshan Pheasant. Seeing that the demon girl had brought them here, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but be suspicious in his heart. Is this here to rescue Magneto, or is it going to attack the demon directly? If he's not mistaken. In the original plot, Alcatraz Island is near the Golden Gate Bridge, which is hundreds of kilometers away from Los Angeles. Because Red Tank said that he couldn't swim, Magneto directly dismantled the Golden Gate Bridge, and the other end was directly erected on the Demon Ghost. So, Lawan is a scene person. As long as he makes a move, it must be a big scene. If you make a small fuss, you can't afford to lose that person at all. In the plot of Reversing the Future, in order to dismantle the stage of the Sentinel press conference, Magneto could have flown over by himself, but he had to tear down a stadium and fly over it. The immortals in Oriental mythology are all flying with Edgeworth, and it's okay for this guy to directly control a stadium. The battle of demons and ghosts is the same. The red tank can't swim. You can directly use your ability to hold up a large steel plate or 2 buses. I can bring dozens of people to the island. For Mao to dismantle a bridge nearly 3 kilometers long and pave it directly. Qin Haisheng seriously suspected that this old man was actually just trying to install forks. So the question is, this is not far from the demons. What are you going to do next? Saying. And where is Magneto's Mutant Brotherhood camp? There should be quite a few mutants over there, or maybe they can go and get another wave of wool. Ordinarily. Next, whether it's attacking Alcatraz or rescuing Magneto. You can't just go with a few of them. The Magneto-formed Brotherhood has a large number of people, and it is bound to come in handy at this time. It's just a pity. After the demon girl took the 3 of them to Luoshan Chicken, she directly let them open a supreme suite in a 5-star hotel and let them stay first. Then the shapeshifter said that she still needed to prepare and let the 3 of them wait here for news first. Then he threw a few bundles of American knives at the 3 of them and changed into a middle-aged man and left. Qin Haisheng realized. This female devil obviously still doesn't treat the 3 of them as her own. Come to think of it, the doppelganger and the red tank were both newly recruited, and Qin Haisheng was a student of Professor Charles. It's strange that the demonic girl can treat them as her own. Even if you want to use them, you will only be careful to take precautions, and you must not tell them everything. And the demonic girl left them so much money, I'm afraid it's not. Gotta let them stay here for a lot of days, right? Fortunately, there is still a doppelganger here, which makes Qin Haisheng feel a lot of comfort in his heart. Whoever cares about it is a ram and a ewe, and the one who can produce wool is a good sheep. So, Qin Haisheng began to think about how to get wool from the doppelganger's body. As a result, Qin Haisheng found out that this guy was actually a senior otaku. My only hobby may be lying in bed and watching TV. Anyway, after a full day, Qin Haisheng hadn't seen this guy come out of the room. Even the meals are sent directly to the room by the waiter. He couldn't help but wonder, why did this guy rob 7 banks in the first place? Such a homely person, you don't bother to go out and spend money when you give you, right? As a result, when Qin Haisheng couldn't help but ask, this guy smiled mysteriously and said, "Who says I'm just going to sit in my room and watch TV? Who says I don't like to spend money? Hey. When you're not looking, I've been in the bar for a day, and I've even taken 3 girls. And I'm watching a movie with a beautiful lady. There's also a slack in my trip to nearby Hollywood and a little star. There's also a restaurant where I'm eating at a Brolin restaurant and enjoying a delicious French meal. I'm Nima." Qin Haisheng was really shocked at this time. What does it mean to be a winner in life? That's it, okay. Alone, no matter how happy you are, there is only one happiness. But this guy can have countless happiness at the same time. How can this compare? No wonder this thing went to rob the bank. I also robbed 7 at a time. It is said that his doppelganger can theoretically be infinitely numerous. So, if you only rob 1 or 2 banks, it's really not enough for so many doppelgangers. Oh, that's not right. This guy was arrested after robbing the bank, so where did he get so much money to go out and squander now? Thinking of this, Qin Haisheng hurriedly ran back to the living room and opened the drawer under the coffee table. Sure enough, none of the beautiful knives inside are left. Before, the demon girl left about 50,000 beautiful knives, and she didn't say how long it would take to come back. Because the money was for the 3 of them, it was put in the drawer of the coffee table by Qin Haisheng. I was thinking that when someone wanted to use the money, I just took a few of them myself. Anyway, for mutants like them, money really doesn't matter. Strong strength is the key. But where did you think that the doppelganger guy would play in the city? As long as there are enough doppelgangers, even $50,000 may not be enough for him to enjoy a whole day. Bastard! Qin Haisheng found that the money was gone, and immediately turned around and came to the doppelganger's room, and picked this guy up from the bed. Take the money of the 3 of us, and let you go for the pleasure alone, right? Rub. I don't care how many doppelgangers you've split up with now. Take back your doppelgangers. He wasn't really angry that the money was stolen by this guy himself. But this guy has so many doppelgangers, why doesn't a single attribute bubble fall at home? Could it be that in his case, only the separated ones will drop attribute bubbles? Or, The one who stayed in the hotel was not his original figure at all. Under Qin Haisheng's coercion, the doppelganger Jamie had no choice but to recruit back the scattered clones one by one. For example, some clones who have squandered the beautiful knives they have taken out don't need to be summoned back at all. Just let the clones find a place where no one is around, and then disappear in place. It's just that the money that was brought out hasn't had time to be spent. Or the clones who bought something and were reluctant to throw it away, so they could only rush to the hotel one by one. Thereupon, on this day, the doorman of the hotel went straight crazy. Good guy, just said welcome to a guest, and watched the other person walk into the hotel. As a result, within a few seconds, another person who looked exactly the same walked into the hotel from the outside. And then several. Exactly the same people lined up to enter the hotel. No one can stand this red chicken. Qin Haisheng didn't care if the doorman was crazy or not. He was really going crazy himself. Looking at Jamie's clone who had been crowded into a room, he was forced by Qin Hai to not return to the synthesis body. But it turned out that almost 2 hours had passed, and not a single bubble had fallen. He immediately realized that something was wrong. Among so many clones, I'm afraid that none of them are Jamie's deities at all. I don't even know when this product will run. Jamie's doppelganger ability is really good. Under normal circumstances, it is estimated that few people can tell which of them is a doppelganger and which is the deity. The most outrageous thing is, his doppelganger can be doppelganger again. However, Qin Haisheng dared to conclude that there was absolutely no deity of this product in this room full of doppelgangers. Otherwise, this guy has used his superpowers for so long, and it is impossible for him to not drop an attribute bubble once. He pondered for a moment and felt that his actions might have scared Jamie, so Jamie's deity didn't dare to come back. But at the same time, Jamie probably has some other purpose and doesn't want to really leave at this time. That's why he still sent so many clones here to deal with Qin Haisheng. Qin Haisheng knew that if Jamie's deity never came back, then it would be pointless for him to guard this group of clones. Because after Jamie's doppelganger leaves the deity, it will disappear after a certain period of time. So Qin Haisheng pretended not to find out that Jamie's deity was not here, but urged Jamie's group of doppelgangers to hand over all the money left on them. As a result, more than 20 Jamie's doppelgangers and the money handed over in the end added up, which was only more than 3,000 meters of knives. The supreme suite they lived in alone cost 3,500 meters a day. When they moved in, the demonic girl only paid them for 2 days. This means, if the shapeshifter doesn't come back in 2 days, they won't even have a place to live. I'll keep the money for the time being, are you okay? Qin Haisheng said, and without waiting for Jamie to make a statement, he had already put the .32-45 American knife into his pocket. More than 20 of Jamie's doppelgangers shrugged their shoulders and spread their hands in unison, indicating what else could they say? All right. He spent $50,000 and only this was left. How could he still have the right to speak? In addition to Jamie, though, they also have a companion, Red Tank. In any case, Qin Haisheng always had to symbolically ask the Red Tank's opinion. And this guy Red Tank is the real otaku. I have been sleeping since I moved into the hotel and I haven't even eaten. According to what Qin Haisheng knew through his previous life, the power of the Red Tank came from the magic of the evil god Sidolak. This magic is almost inexhaustible and inexhaustible. Therefore, this guy also doesn't need to eat at all. The little energy that food can provide is not even a drop in the bucket for this guy. When Qin Haisheng came to the door of the Red Tank's room, he heard a snoring sound like thunder coming from inside. He reached out and knocked on the door. There was a slight pause in the snoring inside, and then it rumbled again. Qin Haisheng was helpless, so he could only try to push the door. As a result, this guy really didn't lock the door. Brother Tank, Qin Haisheng poked his head in, just about to wake up the Red Tank and explain the situation to him. Then I was shocked to find out. The Red Tank did not sleep on the bed, but directly on the floor. All right. This guy is so big that I guess the hotel bed can't handle it at all. But that's not the point. The key question is, around this guy's huge body, there were countless attribute bubbles floating densely. Hold a big grass. Qin Haisheng was really shocked. If you say, Naughty is a bubble fighter, then this red tank is simply a bubble aircraft carrier. But that's not right. It stands to reason that red tank shouldn't be a mutant. How can there be bubbles falling? And mutants, only when using superpowers, will attribute bubbles fall. But this guy is just sleeping. I slept with so many bubbles. Even if these bubbles look like colorless basic attribute bubbles. But that's also very good, okay. Qin Haisheng suppressed his excitement, and as he walked into the room, he coughed lightly and said, Brother Tank. Mark. There's something I have to tell you about. Qin Haisheng said as he approached the red tank. He didn't dare to approach quietly. Otherwise, once he is mistaken for the enemy by the sleeping red tank, he will plot against him. This guy is crazy. I'm afraid he can tear down the entire hotel building. Even if Qin Haisheng can barely be regarded as a 4th-level mutant now, he may not be someone's opponent in front of the red tank with infinite strength. When Qin Haisheng walked to the side of the red tank within 2 meters, the guy's snoring stopped suddenly, and then he rolled over and sat up. Don't look at this guy's big size, at least 400 or 500 pounds in weight. But people are strong, not fat. So his movements were not slow at all, and he looked like a sleeping lion had suddenly awakened. The pair of sharp eyes under the helmet looked straight over, which also gave Qin Haisheng a strong sense of oppression. And what Qin Haisheng didn't expect was, when this guy got up, the attribute bubbles that were touched by his body actually merged into the body of the red tank one by one under his gaze. It's such a simple action. At least half of the thousands of attribute bubbles that originally surrounded him returned to the body of the red tank. This special meow also has a recycling function. Click dash. Qin Haisheng heard it. It was the sound of his heartbreak. Don't move yet. Seeing that the red tank was about to stand up, Qin Haisheng was so frightened that he hurriedly shouted. Red tank was startled and quickly stopped getting up. What's wrong? Did someone plant a bomb next to me? It's okay. As long as it's not a nuclear bomb, an ordinary bomb can't kill me. Listen, this is human talk? Qin Haisheng waved his hand a little speechlessly and said, It's like this. You just sit still, and I'll tell you something. When the demon girl left, didn't she leave us with 50,000 beautiful swords? Qin Haisheng said as he sat down next to the red tank. Meantime, one by one, the colorless attribute bubbles were picked up and absorbed by him. Pick up +5 strength stat. From the red tank. Pick up +7 strength stat. From the red tank. Pick up +5 defense stat. From the red tank. A series of prompts made Qin Haisheng's scalp tingle, and he even lost his voice a little when he talked to red tank. It's really a human tank. Qin Haisheng found that the most of these bubbles he picked up were the strength attributes. The second is the defensive attribute. Of the almost 10 attribute bubbles, 7 are strength attributes, 2 are defense attributes, and the rest is one of the other 4. Even if the red tank sat up just now, he directly recovered most of the bubbles. But there are hundreds of others. Qin Haisheng belongs to a wave of fat this time. You can almost clearly feel that your strength is constantly expanding like a blowing ball. If it is said that Qin Haisheng before, after awakening the ability of the Flame King, he was a typical mage. Now he's starting to move in the direction of a melee mage. Hey. Talk, what are you doing here? Because those attribute bubbles are surrounded by the red tank. Qin Haisheng, who was sitting beside the red tank, wanted to pick up the attribute bubbles behind the red tank and on the other side, so he had to. Reaching out is not. But his actions are very suspicious. Because of the way he looked, it looked like he was about to reach out and hug the big thick waist of the red tank. It almost didn't blow up the red tank. I'm telling you, boy, don't move. I don't like a skinny man like you. The movements in Qin Haisheng's hands suddenly froze. What is this? You don't like men, don't I like it? Is it that the little naughty cat is not cute enough, or that the phantom cat is not good looking? Even if I like grandma's shape, I won't like you. Oh no. Does this guy mean? He doesn't like a skinny man like me, right? Instead of saying that you don't like men, Qin Haisheng felt as if he had discovered something strange again. Qin Haisheng hurriedly stood up and turned to the other side of the red tank and said while quickly picking up the attribute bubbles on this side. Don't worry, brother tank, I don't like men either. As for my movements, don't mind, I like to move around while talking. This could be. Children have a lot of movement sequelae. Red Tank looked at Qin Haisheng, who was talking and waving his hands wildly and couldn't help but look confused. Then he came to a conclusion. I'm afraid this Oriental kid isn't there something seriously ill. Okay, isn't it just that Jamie's kid spent all the money? Red Tank said with some impatience. Anyway, I don't have to spend money. If I don't have money, I don't have money. Don't disturb my sleep. Qin Haisheng hurriedly waved his hand and said, Who says you don't have to spend money? You don't need to eat, but our accommodation costs a lot of money. But now we only have more than $3,000 left, which is not enough to renew the house for a day, and the day after tomorrow. We had to be kicked out of the hotel and sleep on the streets. Red Tank frowned and said, What then? Change rooms. Qin Hai said physiologically. This Supreme Suite is too expensive. We can't afford to live in it now, so let's change to a cheaper room. At least we can stay for a few more days. So, half an hour later, the three of them moved from the Supreme Suite to a fairly spacious triple room. This room is much cheaper, only $150 a day. Coupled with the refund of the one-day room Premier Suite, if other expenses are not counted, they will have no problem staying here for the next month. In fact, they can wait until tomorrow to move. After all, the money for the Supreme Suite has been deducted, and whether you move or not will be calculated at that price. But if he continues to stay in the Supreme Suite, how can Qin Haisheng have a chance to pick wool from the Red Tank? He can't just drill into the Red Tank room, right? It's okay to say once or twice, but I'm afraid that the Red Tank really thinks that Qin Haisheng is hungry for his muscles. And now 3 people live in one room, so it's much more convenient. Red Tank still didn't have a bed, but made a bunk directly under the windowsill. Lie down on your back to the ground, and in less than 10 seconds, you start snoring again. Puff dash. The Red Tank slept for about half a minute, and Qin Haisheng saw it. A big, round transparent bubble that appeared out of thin air. Enough, brat. If you mess around me again, believe it or not, I'll rip your head off and stuff it into your PY. 3 hours later, the Red Tank, which had been awakened by Qin Haisheng several times, finally couldn't bear it anymore. Even those eyes had begun to become bloodshot and red, as if they were about to turn into bloodthirsty demons. Qin Haisheng shuddered and hurriedly smiled awkwardly and said, Brother Tank misunderstood. I just want to see the night view of Luoshan Pheasant. Haha, people from small places have never seen the world. Don't blame Brother Tank. Qin Haisheng said, pretending to stretch his waist, taking the opportunity to fish away a few bubbles around the Red Tank, and then turned around and slipped away. He feels that this sheep can be raised first and then raised, or let this guy go today. Because the Red Tank is already bald by him. The specific manifestation is, after the Red Tank falls asleep, the bubbles that continue to fall become less and less. This may be because the bubbles he dropped were all picked up by Qin Haisheng, and he himself didn't recover much. Ordinarily, the magic from the evil god Cedalak is endless, and it shouldn't have been taken off so quickly. So he plans to raise this big fat sheep well. Moreover, Qin Haisheng has a new goal at this time. It's the self-figure of the doppelganger Jamie, and he actually came back at some point. Just now, Jamie went to the bathroom. When I came back, I sat there and was stunned for a while. Then his body began to slowly fall bubbles one by one. Qin Haisheng was very sure that Jamie had not left the room during this time. And there was definitely no fourth person in this room. So, how did Jamie steal the beam and replace the original doppelganger with the deity? Could it be that this guy's doppelganger and deity can be swapped within a certain distance? If this is the case, it means that any doppelganger of the doppelganger can be transformed into a deity by him. If that's the case, then his ability is terrifying. Even if you have a way to find out which one his deity is, he can replace one of his doppelgangers with a deadly crisis when the deity encounters a fatal crisis. No way. This ability has to be brushed out. Qin Haisheng's eyes were also a little red, purely greedy. So he hurriedly approached the doppelganger Jamie and asked while waving his hand to pick up the 2 bubbles that had just fallen. Jamie, what's the situation? Look at you, isn't something wrong? I don't know if it's luck or... Because, Jamie, in addition to his doppelganger abilities, is a weak chicken himself. Therefore, the bubbles he dropped were actually the core of his doppelganger's ability. The two bubbles immediately increased Qin Haisheng's clone ability core by 13 points. That's good. Others drop bubbles only by dropping basic attributes and occasionally dropping a core of ability. Although this guy doesn't drop a lot, it's full of dry goods. Jamie really wasn't quite right, otherwise he wouldn't have suddenly let his deity return here. Before, Qin Haisheng thought that the clone he left in the room would dissipate after a long time. Then Jamie doesn't want to be exposed, and the deity must return. But now he doesn't think so. If this guy's deity and the doppelganger are indeed interchangeable, he can naturally renew his life at any time for the clone he left in the room. And Jamie didn't look quite right when he came out of the bathroom, for sure. Something must have happened to him. Seeing Qin Haisheng asking, Jamie's expression was a little unnatural at first. A few more prevarications followed, but soon he sat up from the bed abruptly. I saw that his face was slightly pale, and he said nervously, Something is wrong. Qin. I'll be honest, you. Don't be angry. Qin Haisheng frowned slightly, realizing that things were not very simple. You say? I listened. Feel relieved. We're in this group, and Kane and I will help you, no matter what difficulties you encounter. Right, Tank brother? Red Tank only snorted coldly when he heard this and did not answer. This guy's anger hasn't subsided, and when anyone sleeps, he finds that there is always someone around him with bad intentions, and he probably can't be happy. Jamie rubbed his hands, glanced in the direction of the door, and then said with a bitter face, I just seem to have provoked a powerful character outside. She was able to lock onto my original position, and she'll probably come to the door right away. Well? Qin Haisheng is not surprised that this guy has a clone, or the deity is wandering outside. But it's unusual to be able to be locked in the position of the deity. Looking at Jamie with a panicked face, Qin Haisheng still asked suspiciously, What's the use of her being able to lock onto your deity? Isn't it possible for you to transfer the deity and the doppelganger to each other? Hearing this, Jamie was stunned at first, as if he didn't expect Qin Haisheng to actually know the secret of his ability. But then his face fell again, and he said anxiously, But I can't transfer it now. That witch didn't know how to use it, so let my abilities get out of hand. What kind of woman can interfere with the superpower of a doppelganger? Just when Qin Haisheng was puzzled, he heard a knock on the door. Jamie immediately shrank into the corner in a panic like an electric shock, and pointed to the door with a panicked expression. Here she comes. Qin Haisheng glanced at Jamie, then walked to the door casually and slowly pulled the door open. Then I saw a blonde girl, slender figure and beautiful looking standing at the door with an angry face. Seeing this familiar face, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but lose his mind for a moment. It's just that he didn't expect that the doppelganger would provoke this great god. She is known as the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff. This woman is not simple, and her presence in the Avengers is not very strong. But actually, in the Marvel world, she is definitely one of the top powerhouses. According to the classification in the comics, she is already an Omega-level boss under normal circumstances. But once she gets out of control, it's a nightmare existence that can destroy the world. The appearance of the Scarlet Witch, compared with the Widow Sister, is more in line with the aesthetics of the Orientals. Therefore, in his previous life, Qin Haisheng often sighed when he watched movies. How could such a standard beauty fall in love with the iron bump of Vision? And in the comics, it was precisely because of the combination with Vision that she was unable to have children, which made Scarlet Witch's spirit collapse for a while. If an ordinary woman collapses, it will collapse. Kanama. This is an existence that can change the world with spirits. Her first mental breakdown led directly to the dissolution of the Avengers, in which Ant-Man, Hawkeye, and Vision all died. The second nervous breakdown turned the world into a utopia, causing the mutant population to plummet from 1 million to 182. And that's just the unintentional consequence of her. If it's intentional, it is estimated that if she wants to destroy the world, it will be a matter of a thought. Therefore, Qin Haisheng's first thought when he saw the Scarlet Witch was not to pluck her wool. It's not about wanting to get her chaos magic. It turned out that such a big beauty must not be allowed to be troubled by the robot of vision. Don't you just want to have a baby? Just work yourself and help her give birth to one. In this way, the world can be preserved and all mankind will be preserved. Qin Haisheng suddenly felt that he was incomparably great. And Wanda, who has not really become a Scarlet Witch at this moment, can't help but feel ashamed and angry when she looks at the big boy in front of her. Sure enough. You guys, you don't have a good person. As he spoke, Wanda dodged and squeezed into the room from Qin Haisheng's side, and then walked towards Jamie murderously. Don't come here. Jamie was obviously frightened and saw his body flicker slightly, as if he wanted to activate his ability to teleport his deity away from here. But he clearly failed. I saw that 5 bubbles fell from this guy's body. Qin Haisheng's eyes lit up at that time, and he hurriedly flashed his body and ran in front of Jamie before Wanda. Then he made a look of stretching out his arms to protect Jamie, and actually took the opportunity to put away all the bubbles that fell from Jamie's side. Boy, it's also a blessing to meet such a weak chicken mutant. The 5 bubbles are still the core of the clone's ability. In this way, the core of Qin Haisheng's accumulated doppelganger ability has actually reached 61 points. He had never felt that it was so easy to obtain an ability core from a mutant. You know, he squatted in the Mutant Academy for a month, picking up attribute bubbles on the training ground every day. It was only a month later that he finally awakened a flame ability. Looking at it now, it seems that just a matter of pushing harder. Today, I can directly brush out this doppelganger ability from Jamie's classmate. You dodge. At this time, Wanda had already rushed to the corner, and then pointed at Qin Hai and said angrily, "You don't seem like a good person, but I don't have time to pay attention to you right now. You let that bastard behind you out, and see if I can kill him." Qin Haisheng didn't know how Jamie provoked Wanda, but it doesn't matter. After all, Qin Haisheng hasn't brushed out the doppelganger ability from Jamie, so naturally, he can't say anything at this time to let Jamie have an accident. So he smiled and said, "I'm sorry. He is my companion, and if he offends in any way, I apologize to you on his behalf." Shut up. Wanda didn't eat it at all, only to see her big pretty eyes blink. A terrifying red glow bloomed in his eyes, and then Qin Haisheng was stunned to find that he had appeared in a dark hut. There was a damp and musty smell in the house. A gray-haired rat ran past the door with impunity, shattering the glimmer of light that penetrated through the crack in the door. And Qin Haisheng himself has become a 6- or 7-year-old child. He was curled up on the corner of the bed with a helpless face, staring blankly at the dark ceiling. Qin Haisheng was inexplicably stunned for a moment, and then suddenly realized that this was the scene he had experienced when he was a child. Yes, he was also an orphan in his previous life. His parents died in a mining accident when he was very young. After Qin Hai grew up, he couldn't even remember what his parents looked like. And he grew up in his uncle's house. Uncle was okay with him at first, after all. While raising him, he also inherited a large amount of compensation. But after his uncle divorced and married his second daughter-in-law, Qin Haisheng's life was not easy. It's a sad and corny story. After Qin Hai grew up, he cut off contact with his uncle and never mentioned this matter in front of others. But when he was 6 or 7 years old, the years when he was abused by his aunt were always the deepest nightmare in his heart that he could never forget. It's really boring. Annoying, destroy. Qin Haisheng just lost his mind for a moment, and he already realized that he should have been pulled into the illusion by Wanda. And Wanda didn't really understand Qin Haisheng's past, but through the illusion, she directly reflected the most terrifying scene in the depths of Qin Haisheng's soul. It's just that. What once scared Qin Haisheng the most, now it seems. Actually, it's nothing. Because of this, Qin Haisheng was able to see through this illusion in a very short time. Then Qin Haisheng's heart moved. He turned into a flame giant, and then slammed his flame fist into the air in front of him. There was a loud boom. The whole world seemed to shake violently. And then, I saw that the surrounding scenery was like broken glass, and countless fine spiderweb-like cracks appeared. Then, just hear a crunch click. In the next moment, Qin Haisheng had already returned to the real world, still standing in front of Jamie. It's just that. A beautiful little face to the extreme, I don't know when. It had already come up to him, less than 5 centimeters away from him at most. Qin Haisheng, who had just woken up from the illusion, seemed to be a little confused in his mind. Seeing such a pretty face that brought disaster to the country and the people in front of him, he leaned forward almost instinctively. Then I heard a soft pop. A sweet taste immediately filled Qin Haisheng's heart. Wanda, who was raided, was stunned for 3 seconds and then suddenly screamed, and then at a very strange speed, with a whoosh, he exited the guest room and ran away without a trace. That scream woke Qin Haisheng up. That's when he realized what had just happened. I'll go. It's not my fault. It was you, the witch, who pulled me into the illusion and sent me to the door. It's like when you bring a plate of hot meat buns to a beggar who has been hungry for 3 days. Then can you blame this beggar for grabbing a meat bun and eating it without your permission? Qin Haisheng felt. Human nature cannot stand the test. Well, if the word human is removed, it will be even more untestable. After all, Qin Haisheng is a man who has been single for decades in his past life and this life. At that moment just now, wouldn't he be sick if he didn't react? It's just that Qin Haisheng didn't expect that he would actually use this way to scare Wanda away. Sure enough, I'm still fierce. What chaos magic is not as good as one of your own kiss? The chosen one is talking about him, Qin Haisheng, right? Also scared was Jamie. This weak chicken mutant is stupid for the whole thing. What's going on? How did that witch get rid of it so easily? She was offended like this. Shouldn't she just go berserk? You know, before, on the street, Jamie just looked at this little girl's good looks and went up to laugh a few words. And I want to take the little girl to see the goldfish. Isn't that not at all? As a result, the little girl went crazy and chased him. Especially after discovering that he was a mutant, he was even more ruthless, destroying his 5 clones in one go. What's even more terrifying? The witch didn't know how to know where his deity was. Later, when his deity fled back here, it turned out that his ability to swap his own figure and his clone can't be activated. However, just now, Qin Haisheng obviously did 10,000 times more than him. But why didn't that little girl fight with Qin Haisheng, but ran away directly? How does this work? Could it be that he is too reserved, and if he wants to soak this witch, he has to be real as soon as he meets? Qin Haisheng gently licked his lips that remained fragrant, sighed softly, and then turned his head to look at Jamie behind him, and said, "You're really good. You dare to mess with this ant?" Jamie said with a look of trepidation. She? Who is she? Qin Haisheng said expressionlessly. An existence you can't afford to mess with. Jamie was about to cry. Now he knew he couldn't afford to mess with him, but it was useless. I've already messed with it before. So what should I do? Qin Haisheng wanted to say, then you can ask for more blessings for yourself. But he was afraid of hitting the poor weak chicken, so he encouraged him and said, Actually, I feel that your superpowers still have potential. Why don't you take advantage of the current opportunity to dig into it? Jamie was stunned and said, How do you dig this? This ability of mine is kind of like a passive ability. Sometimes if you accidentally stumble while walking, you can automatically separate a doppelganger. I've been researching this ability for so many years, and that's why I've been able to study the effect of a doppelganger and a Buddha figure swapping. I rub. Walking and being mixed up, one person instantly becomes 2 people is okay. Qin Haisheng said with a shiny look in his eyes. Then if you are punched, you will definitely split into a clone, right? Seeing Jamie nodding repeatedly, he continued to ask, Then are you being beaten out of the deity or the doppelganger? Jamie said as a matter of course, it must be a doppelganger. That's it. Qin Haisheng snapped his fingers and said, I know where you're going to do next. You have to try to do it. When you are punched, the one that flies out backwards will be replaced by the honorable, and the one who stays in place to take the damage is the doppelganger, so that you are almost invincible in close combat. Jamie was stunned for a while, and then said that it was. Indeed, Every time you are attacked, you will let the deity split out and leave a clone in place to withstand the enemy's blow. Theoretically, then, one's own deity will never be attacked. So, in the next period of time, Jamie began to receive Qin Haisheng's emergency special training. Actually, it's just getting beaten all the time. Damn. I almost hit my head out. After eating Qin Haisheng's punch, Jamie, who fell heavily on the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood foam, and then stared at Qin Haisheng and complained powerlessly. He wondered if he was crazy, and he would actually believe this guy's words and let Qin Haisheng give him some special training. Outcome. This special training lasted for most of the night, and he was beaten countless times, and his whole body was swollen, but the kind of situation that allowed the deity to be split has never appeared. Every time he was punched, it was his doppelganger who took a few steps back lightly, unscathed. And it was his deity who stood still and was beaten. He knew that he was going to suffer this crime, so he might as well go out and go directly to the witch to receive the punishment. Anyway, he didn't really pay much attention to the witch, so he just said a few words, so he wouldn't really kill himself, right? And if you have to be beaten, it seems that being beaten by a delicate beauty is better than being beaten by this oriental boy. So, after Jamie turned over and got up, he said angrily, "I don't practice anymore. I don't think your idea is reliable at all." "Don't." Qin Haisheng hurriedly grabbed Jamie and said, "I feel like you're on the verge of making it. Practice a few more times, no more than 30 times, and I think you will succeed." If he beats Jamie 30 more times, will Jamie succeed? Qin Haisheng doesn't know. He estimates that he will definitely succeed. The reason why he came up with such a bad idea for Jamie was naturally to facilitate the wool picking. As long as he forces Jamie to keep splitting up his clone, he can keep him in a state of exercising his superpowers. Despite this state, Jamie doesn't drop bubbles that often either. However, almost every time it drops, it is the core bubble of the clone ability. It's the last few times, and this guy doesn't know if his superpowers have really changed or if he has beaten him too much. I actually dropped a few defensive attribute bubbles in a row. Anyway, Qin Haisheng felt that this special training was still very helpful to Jamie. Even if you can't really improve your superpowers, at least. Isn't it nice to get a little beaten up? The main thing is, after his tireless special training, he has picked up 31 points of doppelganger ability core from Jamie. It's only 8 o'clock. Maybe just once, at most twice. He's sure to be able to activate this superpower. I'm about to have a second superpower, so it's exciting to think about. At such a time, how could he possibly stop Jamie? Thereupon, after Jamie got up, he didn't allow the other party to refuse, and directly hugged him with an electric cannon. Ping dash. Jamie in front of him is once again split in two. A Jamie standing in front of Qin Haisheng bent down in pain. The other Jamie staggered back 6 or 7 steps, slammed the back of his head against the wall, and he screamed "wow" in pain. Then he pointed at Qin Haisheng and scolded bitterly. "Falk. I said I wouldn't practice anymore. Why are you still beating me? You're murdering, bastard." Qin Haisheng looked at the bent Jamie in front of him in a daze, with a painful face, but not a word. I looked at Jamie, who was rubbing his head and scolding at the corner of the wall. Then he looked at the bubbles that had fallen next to the second Jamie and asked with excitement in his eyes, "You, which is your deity now?" Jamie, who was leaning against the wall, was stunned for a moment, pointed to his nose, and said, "Of course it's me. Oh, I'll go, I seem to have succeeded. But that's not right. Although I succeeded in splitting the deity this time, why do I still hurt so much?" "Then the way you said doesn't seem to be useful in battle, right?" Qin Haisheng said a little speechlessly. "Is there a possibility?" "The reason why your deity is in pain is not because you punched me, but because you hit the wall yourself." Jamie was stunned again, and then he danced excitedly. "It worked. My superpowers. This is an evolution, right? I'm invincible." "Stop!" Qin Haisheng saw that this guy's waving arm almost touched the bubble next to him, and hurriedly shouted to stop the goods. With the exception of the red tank monster, the mutants don't seem to be able to absorb the dropped bubbles back. But this bubble was Qin Haisheng's hope for awakening the second superpower, and he didn't want to make a mistake. So he rushed forward with an arrow step, and then raised his hand. He pressed a palm against the wall beside Jamie. Well, the bubble was floating right next to the wall. But this action scared Jamie's face white. No. Big brother, what are you doing with me? I don't call you. Qin Haisheng didn't bother to pay attention to Jamie, who was messy in his heart, but was immersed in great joy. The core of the doppelganger's ability has accumulated more than 100 points, and the doppelganger's ability is being activated. Activation successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the infinite clone ability. Activation successful. Congratulations to the host for gaining the infinite clone ability. This capability is semi-passive, and the host can choose to turn it on or off. The host can actively release the clone by consuming life energy and mental power, or it can choose to automatically release the clone to withstand the attack when it is attacked, and eject the deity to any position within 20 meters to avoid being harmed. Each doppelganger can exert up to 70% of the strength of the deity, and can only have one superpower of the host. The doppelganger can exist for up to 12 hours when it is 1 kilometer away from the host deity, and if it is attacked or uses superpowers during this time, the duration of its existence will be reduced. The host can choose to switch the deity to any doppelganger at will within a radius of 1 kilometer. Theoretically, as long as the host has enough life energy and spiritual power, it can create an infinite doppelganger. After the life energy and mental power are consumed, it will be completely restored in about 10 minutes. Ouch, that's good. Qin Haisheng is still quite satisfied with this ability. It seems that the doppelganger ability he activated has perfectly replicated the level of development of Jamie's current ability, and with a certain amount of autonomy. This ability should be a completely passive ability in Jamie's body. As soon as he is beaten, a doppelganger will automatically pop up, and he can't control it at all. But here in Qin Haisheng, you can choose to turn it on or off by yourself, which is very nice. After all, Qin Haisheng is not a weak chicken like Jamie, although he is still similar to a mage attribute now. But usually so many attribute points are not picked up for nothing. Especially today, I have picked up a lot of wool from the red tank, and my strength has been extremely amazingly improved, and my defensive attributes have also increased several times. In this case, normal attacks fall on him, and it's hard to hurt him. If the ability of this automatic ejection clone is not turned off, he and his girlfriend's movement will be slightly stronger in the future, and it will be smack, pop out to Qin Haisheng. How embarrassing must it be? Of course, if you do sports with more than 2 female friends at the same time, then this ability is very useful. Like what? Let the little naughty, Phantom Cat and the 2 Qin Haisheng come together to play a mixed doubles. Isn't it amazing to have a tennis match? Hey, you're not done. Get out of the way. Jamie saw that Qin Haisheng didn't say anything, but he was still there smirking, and suddenly there was a chill, and he hurriedly pushed Qin Haisheng away and ran to the side of the red tank as if he was escaping. It wasn't until this time that Qin Haisheng noticed. Good guys, there are hundreds of attribute bubbles accumulated around the red tank. It seems that this guy's evil god energy is really endless. And this guy is really able to sleep too. Qin Haisheng and Jamie have been training here for half a night, and this thing can actually sleep? The quality of sleep is simply unbeatable. But what does this guy mean by Jamie? What I'm special about Meow is that I just awakened a superpower. It's just a little excited. Are you afraid of a yarn? And you wouldn't think the red tank would protect you, would you? That's really wrong, okay? So, Qin Haisheng walked over there with a sneer. Red Tank, who was woken up again, glared at the two angrily and said, "Enough of you two." Qin Haisheng smiled, grabbed Jamie and said, "It's okay. Brother Tank, you go back to sleep. We have us here to protect you. You don't have to worry about danger." While speaking, Qin Haisheng seemed to be doing radio gymnastics. Dance in front of the red tank, taking the opportunity to take away all the attribute bubbles dropped by the red tank. Just when the red tank was on the verge of erupting again, a sharp knock was heard on the door. Then, before the 3 of them could react, they heard a bang, and the door had been kicked open from the outside. Then, Qin Haisheng suddenly felt as if he had been hit by an oncoming truck. Immediately, I flew backwards involuntarily. During this time, Qin Haisheng's thoughts were racing, and he originally wanted to try the ability of the infinite clone and see. At this time, it would be a feeling to let the deity catapult to the side. However, then he felt that this newly awakened ability should be kept as a whole card and should not be used in front of people as much as possible. As for this inexplicable attack, he had already guessed what was going on. And this attack seems to be violent, but in fact, it can't do any harm to him now. As a result, Qin Haisheng also gave up the idea of opening the doppelganger ability. Then I heard 3 muffled sounds of bang, bang, bang. The 3 figures were knocked into the air and slammed against the opposite wall. It's just that there is no red tank among these 3 people. That guy weighs more than 500 pounds, and he was lying on the ground just now, trying to knock him out. How much strength does it take? And the 3 people who were knocked into the air were a Qin Haisheng and 2 Jamie. Jamie was knocked down and immediately passively split into a clone. The deity quickly retreated to avoid the enemy's attacks. But it's useless. It hit them too fast. The deity that flew out of this powerful impact also did not escape the fate of being hung on the wall. So, when a doppelganger is happy, he can indeed have many times as much happiness. But when you are beaten, you will inevitably have to enjoy double the pain. 2 Jamie, plus 1 Qin Haisheng, if the mural is the same, is hung on the wall. It took a few seconds before slowly sliding down the wall. What's different is, Qin Haisheng still looked as usual. But both Jamie wore pain masks. After all, he's just a mutant who fights 5 scum. The defense is estimated to be not much stronger than that of ordinary people, and this is naturally enough for him. At this time, 2 people had already appeared at the doorway that was knocked open. One of them was none other than Wanda the Scarlet Witch, who ran away earlier. Another handsome boy with silver hair and blue eyes. Needless to say, it must be Wanda's twin brother Quicksilver, Pietro Maximoff. This is the fastest male Silver in the world. How fast is he? His conventional speed is 780,000 kilometers per hour, and his ultimate speed can reach the speed of light. Intuitively, if this thing exploded with all his might, he wanted to run around the Earth's equator, and it would theoretically only take 0.1 seconds. What's even more terrifying is that Quicksilver is able to enter the future after 30 seconds to 12 days in atomic vibration after receiving an isotope upgrade to his ability, and can remain for a few minutes to several hours. That's the terrible thing about reaching the limit of speed, even beyond time. Of course, the current Quicksilver is still only a 17 or 18-year-old boy, and his strength is far from reaching its peak. But it has to be said, both siblings are gifted. Under normal circumstances, it belongs to the existence of the potential of the Phoenix female Qin Grey. Qin Haisheng was knocked away by an inexplicable force just now, but he didn't see where the person who attacked him was. I have already guessed that there is a high probability that Quicksilver did this. This handsome guy used to be Qin Haisheng's occasional good. In the movie, the scene where he rescues Magneto is a classic. With bullets flying all over the sky, Quicksilver, who got serious, seemed to have pressed the pause button of time. While everyone else was moving slowly at a speed 100 times slower than a snail, Quicksilver was able to shuttle through this transformed world, tossing aside the bullets that were fired at Magneto, Professor X, and others. And let the muzzles of those prison guards be turned, and the trajectory of the knives flying in the air should be adjusted, etc. From the viewer's point of view, it seems that at that moment, the moment is still. Only Quicksilver can move freely. But that's not the case. This superpower has nothing to do with time. He's just fast enough. The silver-haired little handsome guy still had a youthful spirit at this time, squinted at the 3 people in the room, and then said to Wanda beside him, "Who bullied you before?" Wanda's big pretty eyes rolled, then pointed to Jamie, who had just slipped off the wall, and said, "It's the guy who knows how to DOP." The 2 Jamie who had just landed stumbled at the same time. While the physical pain continued, the mind was struck again. What the hell? I just said a little bit of nasty things to you, as for hating me so much? That Oriental kid kissed you. Why didn't you say that he bullied you? Jamie, who looked aggrieved, was about to explain, but just when he opened his mouth and didn't wait for a sound. It felt as if 10,000 grass and mud horses were running over his face. Puffy. Pontomp. The crash was heard 4 times. Boy. I saw that the 2 Jamie, who were originally standing under the corner of the wall on the right, were thrown to the wall on the right at this moment. And 2 Jamie became 4 at this point. After all, Jamie's doppelganger is a passive ability, and when it encounters an attack, it will automatically clone. And his doppelganger also has his doppelganger ability, so this is 1 to 2, 2 to 4. Quicksilver, who had already returned to Wanda's side, had straight eyes at that time. Good guy, you can't beat me alone. Is this a tactic to come with me in a crowd? Don't think I'm scared of 4 of you. Deal with a weak chicken like you, don't say 4. Even if it's 400, it's only a second for me to KO. So, the annoyed Quicksilver flashed again. Then, the 4 Jamie, who had been sticking to the left wall before, and hadn't even had time to slide to the ground, flew to the right wall and hung on it this time. And, sure enough, the number of this guy has doubled again. 4 Jamie becomes 8. 8 people who looked exactly the same hung neatly on the wall, and the scene was a little dumbfounded. Do you want to fight again? If you conjure up 16 more next time. I'm afraid I can't hang a wall. At this time, Qin Haisheng was looking at a place in the room with straight eyes, as if he had seen a ghost. It's huge. What a big attribute bubble. To be honest, Qin Haisheng had never seen such a big bubble. Normally, the bubbles he picks up from mutants are the size of grape grains. But at this moment, the 3 bubbles that appeared in the air were each the size of a small watermelon. What is this? I can't be dazzled. Or still, this attribute bubble has mutated? Qin Haisheng only hesitated slightly, and then didn't care so much, rushed straight up, and picked up 3 watermelon-sized bubbles at the fastest speed. Pickup plus 85 speed stat. From Quicksilver. Pickup plus 92 speed stat. From Quicksilver. Pickup plus 73 speed stat. From Quicksilver. I rub 3 attribute bubbles, directly adding more than 200 speed attributes. This Nima is too enjoyable. Qin Haisheng probably understood. Or maybe it's because Quicksilver's superpower is the speed of the limit, so there is a high probability that Quicksilver will never drop ability cores. Therefore, the speed attribute of each drop will be very large. And these speed attributes are actually equivalent to the core of Quicksilver's superpowers. That's actually not bad. After all, if a certain ability core that Qin Haisheng picked up could not reach the activation standard in the end, then it would be equivalent to doing all the useless work. However, the speed attribute is real, and after picking it up, it can immediately increase Qin Haisheng's speed. This must have directly improved Qin Haisheng's combat effectiveness. As a Chinese, he believes in the truth of the world's martial arts, only fast and unbreakable. Therefore, even if he couldn't get Quicksilver's superpower core, Qin Haisheng was very satisfied. Hey, what are you doing, boy? Are you not convinced? Quicksilver was hesitating to beat 8 Jamie into 16, but when he saw Qin Haisheng suddenly jump out, he immediately frowned and shouted loudly. Because he feels that this kid seems to be a little disrespectful to himself. It's okay to say that the big guy in the helmet dares to treat himself so contemptuously. You kid was beaten into a photo and hung on the wall by the master just now. What are you still doing here? Qin Haisheng turned his head to look at Quicksilver, although he was not angry when he saw this guy looking lame. It's not just that Quicksilver used to be his occasional time, after all, it's still potential big brother. So Qin Haisheng smiled faintly and said, "Your name is Pietro, right? I'm Qin Haisheng, and the previous thing should have been a misunderstanding. My companion. It's probably just that the mouth is a little cheaper, and now I've been taught a lesson by you. As for my sake, this is the end of the matter, how about it?" Quicksilver's eyes widened, and he said with disdain, "Who are you?" Qin Haisheng, I haven't heard of it at all. Then why do you want me to give you face? Qin Haisheng thinks that this eldest brother is a bit unpopular. Can only helplessly give Wanda a look, meaning that she should persuade her brother. Wanda felt Qin Haisheng's gaze, and her little face was red at that time, probably thinking of being kissed before. But for some reason, she couldn't get angry at all with this handsome and bold Oriental boy. Guessing Qin Haisheng's eyes at this moment, he hesitated for a moment and actually tugged at the corner of his brother's clothes and whispered, "Pietro," or, "Forget it, anyway. I didn't suffer either." No. Quicksilver naturally also noticed Qin Haisheng's eyes and suddenly felt that something was not right. What's the situation? This kid is a thief, and he is not a good person at first glance, so he shouldn't have deceived his stupid and sweet sister. Quicksilver, who was vigilant in his heart, naturally didn't want to let go of Qin Haisheng even more, so he snorted coldly and said, "It's okay if you want me to give you face. You've got to let me attack for 3 seconds, and if you're not knocked down by me after 3 seconds, I'll give you this face. Do you dare to say yes?" Wanda on the side was startled when she heard this and hurriedly shook her head quietly at Qin Haisheng, signaling Qin Haisheng not to agree. Just kidding. No one knows better than she how terrifying her brother's speed is. 3 seconds, which may sound like a short time. But these 3 seconds allowed Quicksilver to continue attacking. That's enough for him to shoot you hundreds of thousands of times, okay? Who knew that Qin Haisheng didn't seem to see Wanda's hint, but instead waved his hand proudly and said, 3 seconds. That's so boring. I'll give you 3 minutes. I'll let you attack me for 3 minutes in a row, and I'm definitely not going to fight back. If, after 3 minutes, don't say that you beat me, even if you force me to take a step back, I will lose. How about it? Hearing Qin Haisheng say this, everyone present was so surprised that they couldn't close their mouths. What are you kidding? Standing there and not fighting back for 3 minutes in a row. In the face of a speed-type player like Quicksilver, isn't that looking for death? Not to mention Jamie, the doppelganger who has turned into 8 photos. Even if it is a meat shield-type player like Red Tank, he will never dare to let Quicksilver attack him for so long. No matter how strong the Red Tank's defense is, if Quicksilver turns into a humanoid electric drill, the brush against the Red Tank's body will be a rotation. It also guarantees that it can drill a big hole in the body of the Red Tank. Wanda was about to cry and quickly grabbed Quicksilver's arm and dragged it out. "Forget it, Pietro, don't cause trouble." "No, you let me go." Quicksilver was completely angry at this time. He felt that Qin Haisheng was insulting him by saying such things. If it weren't for the fear of lack of oxygen, he would be able to run out of the solar system in 3 minutes, okay? How dare you say that you stand there and let me play for 3 minutes? This person is either arrogant or has some serious brain disease. Come, that's what you said. If I'm going to kill you, I deserve to be killed by you. Qin Haisheng took over and said, "Even if I am not killed by you, as long as I am beaten back by you within 3 minutes, I will recognize you and deal with it." But what if you lose? I'm going to lose. Quicksilver couldn't help but let out a wild laugh. "If I lose, I'll leave it to you, okay? Well, a word is a certainty." Qin Haisheng said that. He first winked at Wanda's little eyebrows with a disgraced face and said, "Sister Wanda, you can help me count the time." Then he hooked his finger at Quicksilver and said, "Come on. In these 3 minutes, I'm going to teach you how to behave." When Quicksilver heard this, he was so angry that his silver hair stood on end. "Boy, you're looking for death." Before he could finish speaking, his tall and thin figure suddenly disappeared in place. And Qin Haisheng had already been prepared, and before the afterimage of the other party left in place disappeared, he heard a boom, and Qin Haisheng's body actually ignited a raging flame. Then Qin Haisheng felt a boom, as if there was a gust of wind blowing through his body. But it doesn't matter. He knew that Quicksilver was fast, and if he was faster than Quicksilver, he would definitely be tired to death. But Quicksilver's weakness is that he has no superpowers other than speed. In other words, Quicksilver's attacks rely on speed. When the speed is high to a certain extent, the kinetic energy generated is quite terrifying. If Quicksilver's own body was strong enough, he might even drill a hole directly into the earth. But no matter how powerful the kinetic energy is, it is also a physical attack. At this moment, Qin Haisheng's whole body turned into flames, but he was immune to physical attacks. Even if his body was directly penetrated by Quicksilver, it didn't make any sense. For him, such an attack is no different from a breeze. Brush dash. Quicksilver's figure appeared 2 meters behind Qin Haisheng. It can be seen that his silver hair is slightly curly and his appearance is slightly embarrassed. This time, he drilled through Qin Haisheng's body. Not only did he fail to hurt Qin Haisheng in the slightest, but he almost got a fever. This also depends on his speed to be fast enough, otherwise a little slower. I'm afraid he will become a fireman by now. He didn't expect that Qin Haisheng would still have this hand. The whole person turned into flames. How can this be fought? However, he is a little unwilling to admit defeat now. Then he gritted his teeth, his figure flashed, and he turned into nothingness again. And this time, he didn't pounce on Qin Haisheng again, but began to circle around Qin Haisheng at high speed. The idea of this thing is also simple. You turn into a flame. I can't kill you, so what if I create a tornado around you? I'm going to blow you away. Anyway, what I just said is that if I ask you to take a step back in 3 minutes, you'll lose then. I'm not playing tricks like this. Anyway, he doesn't want to lose. If you really lose, what should this kid do if he makes any more excessive demands? Although Quicksilver doesn't have the superpower of the wind attribute, when his movement speed in a certain area reaches a certain level, he can naturally form a terrifying gale. In just a few seconds, the wind began to blow in the small guest room, and it was getting stronger. I saw that some small objects in the room were blown up one after another. The TV, the vase, the ashtray, and the quilt on the bed were all blown into the air by the wind. Followed by, when more than 10 seconds passed, the 3 beds on the ground began to shakily and fly. 8 Jamie, who had just slipped off the wall for a short time, were blown to the ceiling by the strong wind. And then, 8 Jamie really becomes 16. Good guys, a whole ceiling was laid. People who look the same are in different poses. The only thing that is the same is that they all show terrified expressions. Damn, didn't you say that after the evolution of superpowers, you will be invincible? Why are they all blown into reliefs on the ceiling now? Only the red tank was still lying under the windowsill unmoved. His abilities are special. Under normal circumstances, he weighs only about 500 pounds. However, as long as he unleashed the power of the evil god, then he could also turn himself into a giant weighing 5,000 Jin or 50,000 Jin. So even if a Category 12 typhoon comes, it's useless. Although the whirlwind created by Quicksilver was fierce, it still couldn't blow his body. But at this time, Qin Haisheng really felt a little unbearable. His normal weight is less than 160 pounds, and now that he has turned into a flame, it is much lighter. This huge wind kept spinning around him, and if he hadn't been in the eye of the wind, I'm afraid he would have been blown away by Quicksilver. In desperation, he had no choice but to release the heat under his feet and burn 2 deep holes in the floor. Then he let the soles of his flaming feet sink into them, and only then did he feel a little more secure. But when a minute passed, when the wind caused by Quicksilver became more and more violent, Qin Haisheng, who was in the eye of the wind, was almost unable to hold on, and the body formed by the flames was blown to the ground. And it could be lifted off by the hole at any time. I'm careless. He shouldn't have pretended to be a fork before, and he just pressed Quicksilver and said that if he was only given 3 seconds, wouldn't this uncle have already lost a long time ago? Cut. But since you're unkind, don't blame me for being unjust. Qin Haisheng saw that if he continued like this, he would have to lose, so he didn't keep his hand anymore. Boom dash. Qin Haisheng no longer deliberately controlled the flames on his body, and as a result, the flames immediately began to spread violently in all directions under the blowing of the strong wind. His flame body, which had been in the shape of a normal human being, suddenly swelled tenfold, almost filling the entire room. Then I heard a scream, and a figure with flames burning all over his body fell out not far from Qin Haisheng's side, screaming all the way out of the door. Up to now, there are 600 flowers today, and there are still 400 left. Can I wait until the conditions are met? Brush dash. Seeing Quicksilver escape, Qin Haisheng did not let the fire on his body continue to spread, but immediately let the flames retract and return to the state of human form. It's just that he still retains his flaming body. After all, 3 minutes haven't come yet, and if Quicksilver kills again, then he won't lose very unjustly. He estimated that Quicksilver should be burned badly by now. Although that guy was very fast, he had been circling around Qin Haisheng just now, and Qin Haisheng let the flames in his body swell out, so no matter how Quicksilver turned around, he would always be shrouded in flames. In this way, it is strange that he does not become a torch. But after all, it's the eldest brother. Qin Haisheng didn't want to do too much, so the flames that controlled his body just now only reached 700 or 800 degrees. Although it will burn Quicksilver, it will not be fatal. Otherwise, he directly broke out with a high temperature of 3,600 degrees, and it is estimated that Wanda Xiaomei will already be picking up her brother's ashes on the ground at this time. Whoosh dash. 10 seconds later, Quicksilver, who was soaked all over, reappeared at the door. I saw that the clothes on this guy's body were burned, and his silver hair had turned gray-black at this time, and there was a lot less. It's like a burnt pig's trotters. Quicksilver glared at Qin Haisheng in flame form with an angry face, and said angrily, "You're so bad. You obviously said that you wouldn't fight back if I attacked, but why did you set fire to me?" Qin Haisheng, who was in the form of a flame, spread his hands, made a strange voice, and said, "I didn't take the initiative to attack you. Haven't you heard the phrase, the fire takes advantage of the wind, and the wind helps the fire? I was in this state after I turned into flames. But you're fanning me all the time. Can the fire not grow stronger and stronger? So, I can't really blame me just now if you don't go around me in circles. How can I burn you?" Quicksilver opened his mouth when he heard this, but he couldn't refute it. Although he knew that Qin Haisheng did it on purpose, there was no way to prove it. "Well, Pietro." At this time, Wanda came out of nowhere and tidied up the scorched clothes on her brother with some distress and said, "As long as he keeps his flame body, you can't do anything about him. Give up." Quicksilver almost wanted to cry without tears, and he knew he wouldn't bet on this guy. "What now?" Said that if he loses, he will have to be at the mercy of Qin Haisheng. Once he admits defeat, it will be equivalent to putting his fate in the hands of this Oriental boy. Just when Quicksilver was still hesitating, Wanda next to him suddenly said, "Okay, Pietro, you don't have to worry about anything. 3 minutes have passed, you've lost." Quicksilver glanced at her sister a little speechlessly. How does he feel a little? My sister seems to be very happy. Please, I'm the brother you believe in, okay? Okay. What do you want to do with me, say it? Since his sister said so, Quicksilver couldn't regret it, so he could only admit defeat in frustration. Qin Haisheng still didn't transform into a physical form, but smiled at the two of them and said that, "Wait a minute, I'll go change my clothes." With that, he plunged into the bathroom next to him. Later, he found out there were no clothes in the bathroom for him to change. And he couldn't go down to get his clothes in the state of the flame body otherwise. Just burn to ashes, okay? So he had no choice but to shout at Jamie, who was still embedded in the ceiling. "Brother Jamie, help get my bag over for a while." Bang! Smack! 16 Jamie began to fall off the ceiling one after the other. It was like a mountain of people. But soon, these Jamie began to merge again. Brush, brush, brush. After a dozen flashes, 16 Jamie regrouped into one. The life energy that was separated completely returned, and Jamie, who had just fallen half to death, had the strength to get up. Then he looked at Qin Haisheng, who poked his head out of the bathroom with an angry face. "It's all to blame on this guy, otherwise he would have become so miserable. I almost died just now." But, thinking about the cause of the incident, it seems that it was caused by Qin Haisheng taking the lead for him. So, what else can he say? I could only honestly find Qin Haisheng's bag from the ruins and send it to him. 2 minutes later. In the guest room, which seems to have been hit by a typhoon or fire, several people sit on the floor. Then Qin Haisheng said with a serious face, "First of all, if the hotel room is made like this, you will have to lose money. This is no problem, right? Even though the hotel owner is just an ordinary person, no one can stop them if they want to run. But the problem is, Qin Haisheng is a member of the Mutant Academy camp. He has an obligation to maintain the relationship between ordinary people and mutants, and naturally, he can't let this happen." Quicksilver wiped the black ash from his hair with some embarrassment and said vaguely, "I can fix this, you go on." Nothing else. Qin Haisheng couldn't help but laugh. How can I just ask you to pay a little money to the hotel? No. My request is that both of you need to join our Xavier Junior Academy. No problem, right? Hearing Qin Haisheng's request, Quicksilver and Wanda's faces changed, and their brows furrowed. After the two glanced at each other, Quicksilver said, "Can I refuse? You're asking too much for a man to ask. We've decided to defect to the Brotherhood of Mutants. And in fact we are." When he said this, he suddenly paused again and stopped talking. Qin Haisheng smiled and said, "I know what you're trying to say. You two probably think you're the children of Magneto Eric, so you're going to have to join your father's power, right?" The brother and sister both looked shocked when they heard this. Wanda couldn't help but ask curiously, "How do you know?" Qin Haisheng pointed to his head and said, "If I said that I would predict magic, would you believe it?" The two siblings immediately pouted. Although they all know that there are not only superpowers, but also magic in this world. But this guy doesn't look like he can do magic. Well, this doesn't really matter. Qin Haisheng did not continue to play the role of a godstick, but continued, "Actually, you can't be entirely sure if you're really Magneto's children, can you? Secondly, do you really agree with Magneto's philosophy if you want to join the Mutant Brotherhood? Uncle Juan's thinking is too extreme, and he always feels that there is no mutual benefit between ordinary people and mutants. Only by completely exterminating humanity can mutants become the true masters of this planet. When you join the Brotherhood of Mutants, did you also want to wield a butcher's knife to the tens of billions of ordinary people around the world to kill the world?" These words made the two siblings' expressions change greatly. Let's be honest. They really hadn't thought about it that much. I just feel that Magneto is their father, so of course they have to join the forces created by their father. No matter what, I can't run to my father's old nemesis, Professor X. But now think about it, if after they join the Brotherhood of Mutants, when their father really ordered them to slaughter ordinary people who were powerless to resist, can it really be done? The two siblings are only 17 years old now, and although their childhood life was not very happy, they are still simple-hearted. At this time, they couldn't help but waver. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng immediately struck while the iron was hot and persuaded him. Plus, although Master Juan and the Professor are in a hostile state on the surface, in fact, their starting point is to allow mutants to get a better living space, even if they are at odds for the time being in the future. After all, we will all end up in the same place. Take another 10,000 steps back, even if you are really willing to be the enemy of all mankind for the sake of your so-called father. But how do you know who is a real normal person, and who is the one who has the X gene and is likely to awaken into a mutant in the future? Is it true that one size fits all, as long as people who have not awakened their superpowers are regarded as ordinary people and all of them are killed? If that's the case, how many people are left in this world? However, you should also know that only Professor Charles can find every mutant in the world. So, even if Master Juan really wants to carry out the plan to eliminate the human race in the end, do you think it is possible for him to do it without cooperating with Professor Charles? In that case, even if you join the Mutant Academy, you may not really be on the opposite side of Magneto. Am I right? Hearing Qin Haisheng's words, the two brothers and sisters were speechless. Although I always feel that something is not right, I can't refute it at all. Seeing this, Qin Haisheng immediately asked, "So, tell me, Pyro, are you willing to keep your promise and accept my terms?" Quicksilver glanced at his sister and saw that his sister was silent, so he had to sigh and say, "Okay, then we'll." Before he could finish his sentence, there was a rush of footsteps outside the door. Then I saw several hotel security guards, and a middle-aged man in a suit came to the door. The door had already been blown apart by the tornado made by Quicksilver, and when they stood in the hallway, they could clearly see the disaster scene inside. Several people stared at each other for a long time, and the man in the suit said with some trepidation, "Excuse me, can I ask what's going on here?" Qin Haisheng smiled and said kindly, "Hello. There was a little accident here. However, the matter has been settled. As for the loss of your hotel, we will compensate according to the price." As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Quicksilver and said, "Hurry up and get the money." Quicksilver couldn't help crying and said, I don't have any money now, can I owe it first? That's right. Since my sister and I have agreed to join the Mutant Academy with you, then we are also a family, so you can put the money on for me first. When I get back to earning money, I will pay it back to you. I'll go. What do you mean by that? You don't have any money, as if I have money. Qin Haisheng glared at Jamie angrily. Originally, they still had $50,000, but they were all troubled by this guy. The last remaining $3,000. He was put into his pocket by Qin Haisheng just now. And then, he turned into flames, and even his clothes were burned, so how could there be that bit of paper money? So here's the problem. Everyone has no money, so don't you have to lose? If you run away. If Professor Charles finds out about it, will he be scolded? An hour later, Qin Haisheng and Wanda appeared at the Catros Hotel in Los Angeles. Of course, they didn't come here to open a room and do something shameful. It's to make money that should be lost, so this is the only way to make a decision. The five of them drew in a circle, and in the end, only Wanda had more than $100 in her hand. Think about this brother and sister, both of whom are the pinnacle of mutants. But he was so poor that he couldn't even eat. You know that they can't be bad guys. Otherwise, with the speed of fast bank, let alone robbing 7 banks, even if you even rob 100, it won't take a second. And his speed can be so fast that even the camera can't capture it, so he doesn't need to worry about anything at all. But in fact, Wanda's ability is even more terrifying. She can construct illusions and even modify a person's memories. If she is willing to make money through her own ability, she can completely let the bosses of several multinational companies voluntarily transfer all their assets to her. Becoming the richest man in the world in minutes, that's really no joke. But none of them did so, preferring to live a very hard life. This is because their adoptive mother, after learning that the 2 children had awakened magical superpowers, has been warning them not to use their superpowers on ordinary people, no matter what time it is. Don't even use superpowers to do bad things. For so many years, they have not forgotten the teachings of their adoptive mother. In fact, at the beginning, when Jamie teased Wanda on the street, Wanda just avoided it in disgust and didn't go to meet him in general. After all, Jamie is so weak that it's hard to believe that this guy is a mutant if you haven't seen with your own eyes that he can unleash multiple clones. At that time, Jamie was really fancy. After he found out that this beautiful girl ignored him, he actually released 6 or 7 doppelgangers and surrounded Wanda in the middle so that she could not escape. And the result is, he's tragic. This time, Wanda was pulled to the Catros Hotel by Qin Haisheng, and her heart was very resistant. Because Qin Haisheng just wanted to use her ability to help herself win money in the gambling club of this hotel. And this is obviously contrary to her usual code of conduct. But the problem is, the hotel room was destroyed by her brother, and she needed a large sum of money to compensate them. They could not afford to pay compensation, which was also contrary to the adoptive mother's teachings. And Qin Haisheng said that he would not let Wanda use superpowers on ordinary people, just let her use them on herself. The reason is that Wanda has a superpower that can modify the probability of reality. Then as long as she adjusts the probability of Qin Haisheng winning to the highest. In this way, even if Wanda is not allowed to use superpowers on ordinary people, it can also solve their lack of money. It was just perfect. It's just that what they didn't expect was, at the entrance of the club of this hotel, there is an instrument similar to a machine security check. Every person who enters the betting club is scanned. And the entrance is also marked with a very eye-catching font. Mutants are not allowed to enter. And they also saw it with their own eyes. A mutant trying to sneak in, as he passed through the security gate, the device sounded a screeching alarm. Then a few black men with guns rushed out, took the guns, and escorted the mutant away. In fact, it is normal for betting clubs to have such rules. After all, there are nearly 1 million mutants in this world, and the abilities of mutants are strange. I believe that not only Wanda's superpowers can control the winning and losing of betting, but also the ability of any mutant can kill all sides on the gambling table. For example, the ability to control things, the ability to read minds, and the ability to see through, and so on. If there were no restrictions on the entry of mutants, then the betting club would have been bankrupt by these mutants a long time ago. It's just that Qin Haisheng and Wanda have never been to this kind of place before, so they don't know at all. Most gambling clubs in the world have such rules. Seeing this, Wanda shrugged her shoulders at Qin Haisheng, saying that she couldn't do anything about it. But Qin Haisheng didn't give up, and after thinking about it, he pulled Wanda aside and said, "Wait a minute, you don't have to go in. Use your abilities on me now and increase my probability of winning to the highest. After all, we only have a capital of $100, and if we lose once, we won't have a chance." Wanda looked at Qin Haisheng with some astonishment and said, "Aren't you a mutant too? You don't want to break in, do you? What's the difference between that and robbery?" Qin Haisheng shook his head and said, "Don't worry, I won't break in. I'll give it a try. What if the instrument doesn't check it out?" Wanda had no choice but to show her ability to Qin Haisheng and then admonished, "This ability can only be maintained for half an hour at most, and when the time is up, you must leave." Qin Haisheng nodded, with the hope of the whole village, $100, and then walked to the door of the club with such a swagger, and slowly passed through the security gate. And as a result, the mutant detection device didn't respond at all. Qin Haisheng walked into the betting club so smoothly. Wanda watched the scene from behind and couldn't help but widen her eyes. How is it possible? Why didn't that instrument have an effect on Qin Haisheng? Is that instrument not advanced enough, or does Qin Haisheng have some kind of ability that can shield scanning? At this time, Qin Haisheng secretly shouted in his heart, "That's really the case." He didn't have any ability to block out scanning, but he had always been suspicious. I may not be the same as the mutants in this world. The reason why mutants can awaken a certain superpower is because they have X genes hidden in their bodies. But Qin Haisheng has been concluded by Professor X that he does not have X gene in his body. There is no doubt that Professor X is the authority in this regard, and his conclusions are certainly more accurate than a device that tests mutants. In fact, Qin Haisheng's ability to awaken superpowers was not because of the X gene, but by picking up attribute bubbles. Therefore, even if Qin Haisheng has the same superpowers as mutants, but in front of this kind of instrument to check mutants, it is still not possible to scan anything, which is also very normal. The club is similar to what Qin Haisheng saw in movies before. In addition to those dazzling slot machines, there are all kinds of poker, dice, roulette, and other ways to play. Qin Haisheng kept Wanda's words in mind and knew that although the probability of winning money was modified by Wanda, the probability of any modification could not reach 100%. According to Wanda's estimates, his probability of winning is about 90% at most. So he didn't dare to wave too much at first. He first bought a box of in-game currency for $100 and then played with the slot machine for a while. No way. If you go to the gambling table to play, the minimum value of the chips you can exchange is $100. This also means that if Qin Haisheng goes to the gambling table to play, once he loses the first bet, then he will have no chance to turn over. The slot machine is different. $100 can be exchanged for 100 game coins. That way he will have many chances. With a high probability of winning, he will never lose at all. Sure enough, in just a few minutes, Qin Haisheng won more than $1,000 from several slot machines. However, Qin Haisheng did not continue. After all, the time is only half an hour and slot machines are too slow to win. So he returned all the game currency and replaced it with chips, and then he went to the gambling table. In the next 20 minutes or so, Qin Haisheng really killed all sides. However, he has always played very steadily, such as betting on dice, only betting on the big and small, not the points. After all, the probability of winning should be close to 50%. The dealer leopard kills, so there will not really be a 50% probability. So coupled with his 90% probability of winning, almost all bets are must-hit. Only lose 1 or 2 handfuls once in a while. But if he is greedy for money and bets directly on specific points, he still won't win much. However, even so, when the time was close to half an hour, Qin Haisheng still used $100 of dollars, a full of $160,000. So Qin Haisheng immediately accepted it when he saw it, went to exchange the chips for cash, and left directly. Although he can also choose to go out and find Wanda to use his superpowers again. But that doesn't make much sense. After Qin Haisheng had superpowers, he gradually changed a lot. For money in the world, there is no longer the desire of the previous life. They compensated the hotel at most 20,000 yuan, and the remaining money of the hundreds of thousands of dollars was enough for a few of them to spend, since this is the case. And why waste that time? It's just that when Qin Haisheng came out of the club with a bag of cash and looked around for Wanda, he found that he seemed to be being followed. It was 4 tall men. 3 whites and 1 black. They've been following Qin Haisheng since he left the club, it seems. Most of them wanted to wait for Qin Haisheng to go to some secluded place so that he could snatch the banknotes in Qin Haisheng's hand. Qin Haisheng didn't know if these 4 guys were temporary or if the gambling club couldn't afford to lose and wanted to get the money back in this way. But it doesn't matter. In addition, Qin Haisheng was not interested in doing anything to these ordinary people. When he got out of the hotel and saw Wanda waiting for him on the side of the road, he immediately glanced at Wanda and pointed behind him in a subtle way. Wanda immediately understood in seconds, knowing that Qin Haisheng meant to ask her to help solve these people. But her expression immediately became tangled, and after a moment she shook her head. Showing her superpowers before and letting Qin Haisheng go to the club to win money, it was already a bit of a challenge to her bottom line. Right now, these people who followed Qin Haisheng were obviously ordinary people, and she remembered her promise to her adoptive mother, but she said that she would not use her superpowers on these ordinary people. Even if she knew in her heart that if she used illusion to mislead these people, she actually saved them. But a promise is a promise, and once she breaks this promise, she doesn't know if she can keep the bottom line in the future. Qin Haisheng smiled when he saw this, but he didn't care, just walked past Wanda quietly. Since Wanda is unwilling to do it, let's figure it out by myself. Seeing the 4 strong men following Qin Haisheng away, Wanda couldn't help but feel a little guilty about Qin Haisheng in her heart. After hesitating for a moment, I slowly followed. Qin Haisheng walked forward along the side of the road unhurriedly. The vicinity of the hotel is relatively prosperous, and it is expected that those 4 people will not dare to do it easily. But it's not a problem to keep going like this. Moreover, Qin Haisheng didn't want to expose his superpowers in front of these people. After hesitating for a moment, he saw a small alley in front of him, so he quickened his pace and turned in. But as soon as he turned into the alley, his mind moved. When the figure swayed, he saw another Qin Haisheng who looked exactly like him walking out of his body. Yes! After obtaining the second superpower, Qin Haisheng used the ability of infinite clone for the first time. It's just that he was very shocked. The clone he created not only looked exactly like him, wore the same clothes, but even. He was also carrying a tote bag in his hand. Qin Haisheng's doppelganger opened the handbag a little confused and found that this bag is also full of bundles of colorful, beautiful knives. Can the doppelganger ability still be used like this? Even the things carried by the deity can be copied in the same way? So, if I'm so buggy, do I still need to find a way to make money in the future? But then he realized, since his doppelganger has left the deity, it can only exist for a maximum of 12 hours. Then this thing that is copied with the doppelganger, I'm afraid it can't always exist forever, right? Therefore, it is not realistic to make a fortune by this method, but if it is used to trick people. Thinking of this, his doppelganger did not delay and immediately hurriedly walked out of the alley with a handbag. The 4 strong men who had been following Qin Haisheng originally saw Qin Haisheng enter the alley and were hurriedly chasing after him. As a result, before they could follow up the alley, they saw that Qin Haisheng actually came out again and almost collided with them. The 4 strong men were startled and quickly stopped. His gaze quickly swept over the passers-by around him, suppressing the idea of making a move, and then the 4 of them pretended to laugh. Qin Haisheng's clone ignored these people and continued to walk along the side of the road. Seeing this, the 4 guys hurriedly followed. Qin Haisheng's deity shrank in the alley and waited for a while, and then he came out again, just when he met Wanda, who was following him. Okay, it's all done, let's go back. Wanda glanced at the 4 strong men who were turning the street corner in the distance and said suspiciously, I see that they have been following a person. Isn't that person you? Qin Haisheng smiled and said, That's definitely not me. I'm not as fast as your brother. You won't think that I ran back from them in an instant. Wanda still didn't understand what was going on, but she didn't ask any more questions. After returning to the hotel where he stayed before, Qin Haisheng paid $18,000 to the hotel. The rest of the money was divided between 10,000 yuan each, and the rest was all handed over to Wanda for safekeeping. The money is safe when it is placed with Wanda, and if Qin Haisheng keeps it himself, he may be stolen by Jamie again and taken out to spend all his time. Later, Qin Haisheng opened a few more rooms in this hotel. Originally, that room must not be able to live. Not only was everything in the room destroyed, but even the walls were still printed with Jamie's painful expression. How could there be any more people? Originally, Qin Haisheng wanted to live in another room with the red tank, so that he could find an opportunity to pick up attributes. It's just a pity. Now that they have money, no one wants to live with anyone else, so they can only open a room per person. After stabilizing, this guy Red Tank continued to sleep darkly every day, and I don't know how he could sleep like this. Pigs also know how to wake up and eat, and when they are full, they can go to sleep again. This guy is good. Even the food is saved. If no one calls him, it is estimated that he can sleep until he is old. Thinking that after this pig fell asleep, there must have been a pile of attribute bubbles around him, Qin Haisheng couldn't help but miss the Phantom Cat again. If he can brush out the Phantom Cat's traversing ability, then he can run to the Red Tank's room to pick up bubbles at any time. Through the exchange with the Wanda brothers and sisters, Qin Haisheng learned. It turns out that these 2 people are also helpers found by the Demon Girl. It was probably because the Demon Girl heard that the brother and sister had something to do with her boss Magneto, and maybe even Magneto's children, so she found them and made an appointment to rescue Magneto together in a few days. At that time, the Demon Girl probably had something to do, and she didn't say much to them, so she let them stay in this hotel by themselves and wait for news from her. The Demon Girl didn't even mention the matter of recruiting them into the Brotherhood. Maybe the female demon felt that since she was the child of Boss Juan, joining the Brotherhood was not a sure thing, so naturally there was no need to emphasize it. But I don't want to. As a result, Qin Haisheng cut off his beard. Days without attributes to pick up are too boring. Fortunately, 3 days later, the demonic girl finally appeared at the hotel. And she brought 3 mutants out of nowhere. The 3 mutants, Qin Haisheng quickly recognized them. One of them is a Toad Man, and this guy is Magneto's old team. His own ability is very average. It's just a 2nd-level mutant. The other is called the Nightwalker, who is also a 2nd-level mutant, but has slightly more special abilities. And the last one. It's a Flash. It's the girl who can open the space portal at will in the battle to reverse the future. When he saw the flickering, Qin Haisheng's eyes suddenly lit up. It's not because this girl is pretty, but because she thinks of the ability to flicker. The ability of this portal is good. If you can brush out this superpower, wouldn't it be much easier to pick up attribute bubbles in the future? For example, if you want to pick up the attribute bubbles generated by the Red Tank after sleeping, you don't have to go to his room yourself. No matter how far away you are, just open a portal. And then he doesn't even have to go over, through the portal. He collects the attribute bubbles on the opposite side. Close the portal again, and even if the Red Tank finds out, there is nothing to be done. It's so beautiful. The Demon Girl listened to Qin Haisheng's advice, and even when she returned to her original appearance, she changed into a small white suit on her body, which looked much more comfortable. After her arrival, she opened 2 adjoining premier suites in the hotel. Each premier suite has 4 bedrooms so that there were just enough of them to live. As for the money Demon Girl, there is definitely no shortage of them. She doesn't have any moral bottom line like the Wanda siblings, and she doesn't mind using her abilities for her own benefit at all. And her ability to make money is just as easy. Not only can she change her appearance and body shape, but she can even perfectly imitate other people's iris and fingerprints. Therefore, if she wants to, she can completely open the safe of any rich man. Even the bank's vault. After opening the room, the demon girl gathered everyone together again and said with a serious expression, "I'm sure everyone knows very well that our purpose this time is to rescue Magneto. But this time Eric is being held in a special place, and we have to wait for an important person to arrive before we can start the operation. And before the action, it is better for everyone to stay in the room and not go out again." Quicksilver frowned slightly when he heard this and said, "Isn't it enough that there are so many of us? I believe that with the strength of the 8 of us present, it will be easy to bulldoze the federal hexagon, right?" The demon girl glanced at Quicksilver and said, "If we want to attack the hexagon, then our strength is indeed enough. We don't even need so many people, just the red tank itself can directly turn the hexagonal building into a ruin. But we are here to save people, not to destroy. I've already investigated. Eric is being held in an underwater prison at a depth of 1,200 meters. Of all of you here, apart from the Toad Man, is there anyone else who is good at fighting underwater? If not, then I'll wait." This time, Quicksilver suddenly stopped squeaking. 1,200 meters underwater. This is terrifying, isn't it? Quicksilver is so fast that you let him cross the Pacific without blinking an eye. When the speed is high to a certain extent, he can run freely on the surface of the sea without sinking into the sea at all. But you let him dive into the water. He's out of temper. It's because he had a drowning experience as a child, and he almost died at the time. He was afraid of water and never even learned to swim. If Magneto hadn't been identified as his father then. At this time, as soon as he heard that he was asked to go to the bottom of the sea to save people, I was afraid that he would immediately decide to quit. Everyone else reacted in the same way. Even if others are not as afraid of water as Quicksilver, but I'm really not good at fighting in the water. Among these people, or only the ability of the Toad Man, is a little bit of water. But the Toad Man is still only a 2nd-level mutant, and his combat effectiveness is estimated to be stronger than that of a physical person. If you want to count on a Toad Man to go into the deep sea to save people, it will definitely be no fun. So, it seems that the important person that the demon girl said she was waiting for must be a mutant who is good at fighting in the water. At this moment, the red tank stood up and said, "Since I'm operating under the sea, I'd better quit. My weight hates getting into the water the most. As soon as you enter the water, you sink to the bottom. Indeed, this guy's body muscles are as strong as metal, and it is estimated that he really can't float in the water. If it's a general river or something like that, it's okay, just walk out of the river bottom. But if this Nema falls into the bottom of the sea at a depth of 1,200 meters, how can he get out?" The demon girl shook her head and said, "You don't need to worry about that. Although Eric is being held at a depth of 1,200 meters, there is actually a way to enter and exit the prison. We don't really need to dive, we need someone who is proficient in underwater warfare, just in case. In addition, it is impossible for all of us to go to the bottom of the sea. There are always a few people left outside to pick you up. If you don't want to go to the bottom of the sea, then stay outside." Red Tank hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. The others didn't say anything when they saw this, but they all bowed their heads and pondered. Probably they all had a certain fear of going deep into the sea. And Qin Haisheng was pondering. Who could be the person who is good at underwater warfare? Among the mutants, are there any who are good at water warfare? Poppy the Iceman should be one, but it certainly won't be him. Could it be that the Sea King and the Sea Queen are gone? Isn't they from the DC universe? I'm supposed to be in the Marvel universe right now. What the hell? It's not going to be a jump, is it?